The auctioneer's gavel came down like a gunshot, and the whole courthouse porch went quiet. Sold. Calhoun Ranch, plus stock and improvements, to the gentleman in the dust coat. Jesse Cole didn't lift his chin. He just laid the last coin on the table, the kind that felt heavier than lead even though it wasn't. The banker's clerk raked the money in with a grin that never reached his eyes. Across the crowd, Ruth Calhoun stood with both hands wrapped around the porch post, as if it was the only thing keeping her upright. Widow's black, sun-faded at the shoulders. A bruise the color of old plums bloomed at her throat, half hidden by her collar. Most folks pretended not to see it. Jesse saw it anyway. He hadn't come to buy land. He'd come to pay a debt. For a woman he didn't know. Or so he'd told himself when he rode into Stillwater at dawn, dust on his boots and a weight in his saddlebag that wasn't all money. Before we continue, tell us in the comments from what town you are watching this from. The words sounded strange in Jesse's head, like something a preacher might say to make a room feel less empty. Still, he held on to them because he needed something steady. Towns had a way of swallowing a man whole if he let them. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Paperwork will be filed with the county. Possession transfers at sundown. Any disputes, take it up with the bank. There were no disputes. Not out loud. Virgil Crane leaned on the rail with a smile that belonged on a coffin. He wore a clean vest and a silver watch chain like it was armor. He didn't bid. He didn't have to. He'd been the shadow behind the bids, the whisper behind the banker's numbers, the reason hands shook when they raised. Crane's eyes found Jesse's and held, not curious, not angry, measuring. Jesse reached for the deed the clerk slid toward him. The paper felt too thin to hold a whole life. Ruth stepped forward fast, as if she might stop time if she moved quick enough. Her voice came out low so no one else could hear. "Mister, you don't have to do this." Jesse finally looked at her. She was younger than the grief on her face made her seem. Late 20s, maybe. Skin weathered by Wyoming wind, not age. Eyes the color of creek stones, sharp and tired. "I already did," he said. "Debt's cleared, that's all." Her fingers tightened on the post until her knuckles went white. "Debt don't just clear in Stillwater. It does if it's paid." Crane chuckled like Jesse had told a joke. He stepped off the rail and walked over, slow and sure, boots clean enough to shame the dust. "Well," Crane said, smiling at Ruth as if they were old friends, "looks like your luck turned." Ruth didn't look at him. Her stare stayed on Jesse, as if Crane was weather, unpleasant, unavoidable, not worth acknowledging. Crane tipped his hat at Jesse. "Didn't catch your name, stranger." Jesse didn't offer his hand. "Don't see why you need it." Crane's smile stayed, but the skin around it tightened. "Because a man who buys what I'm owed is either brave, stupid, or hiding from something bigger than me." Jesse leaned in just enough for Crane to hear him over the creak of the porch boards. "You don't own what you're owed. You just own the paper you wrote it on." The smile slipped for half a second. Then Crane's eyes flicked to the saddlebag hanging off Jesse's horse by the hitching rail. "Must be nice," Crane murmured, "to have money appear when a widow's about to lose everything." Ruth's breath hitched. Jesse caught it. That bruise at her throat wasn't old. It was fresh. Someone had put hands on her recently. Crane touched 2 fingers to the brim of his hat and turned away as if he'd already won. The clerk shoved the deed closer. "Sign there, then you're the owner." Jesse's pen hovered. Ruth's voice came again, barely louder than a prayer. "Don't sign," Jesse frowned. "You want the land back, don't you? This is the only way." Her eyes flashed, not with anger but with panic. "You paid the wrong man." The words landed like cold water. Jesse's pen stopped. Ruth's mouth was close to his ear now, her breath trembling. "That debt wasn't to the bank, it was to Crane. The bank's just the glove he wears so he don't have to touch blood with his own hands." Jesse's gaze cut to the clerk. The clerk's smile had turned brittle. Crane, halfway down the steps, paused like he'd heard a distant sound. Jesse set the pen down. "What are you saying?" Ruth swallowed. "I'm saying if you sign that deed, you don't just buy land. You step into a ledger that ends in the ground." Jesse's jaw worked. He could taste old ghosts, men who smiled while they robbed you, men who shook your hand while they sharpened a knife behind their back. He looked down at the paper again. Name line blank. Everything else neat and final. "You're telling me the bank don't hold your note?" he asked. Ruth shook her head once. "They hold a copy, for show." Crane holds the real one, the one with the terms he didn't read out loud. Jesse's eyes narrowed. Terms like what? Ruth's fingers released the post. They trembled, then steadied, as if she'd decided she was done being afraid, even if her body hadn't caught up yet. Terms like, she said, if I default, he takes the land and he takes my children as labor until it's paid. The porch seemed to tilt under Jesse's feet. You have children? He asked, though he already knew the answer by the way Ruth flinched. 3, she whispered. 2 girls and a boy. They're at home, alone. Jesse's throat tightened. He hadn't planned on thinking about children today. He hadn't planned on thinking about anything that could anchor him. Crane turned back slowly, smile returning like a mask being put on. Problem? Crane called from the steps, loud enough for the crowd to hear. The crowd watched like it was a play they didn't want to be seen enjoying. The clerk's hand hovered over the deed, impatient. Sir, you need to sign. Jesse didn't move. Crane's gaze slid to Ruth, then back to Jesse. Don't tell me the widow's filling your head with ghost stories. Ruth's chin lifted, stubborn as a fence post. It ain't a story. Crane spread his hands. All right, let's speak plain. You paid money. Money clears a debt. Congratulations. The bank's happy. The county's happy. Ruth here gets to keep breathing another day. His eyes hardened. So why are we still talking? Jesse's voice came out low. Because you're not happy. Crane's smile widened again. I'm delighted. Always delighted when a stranger throws money at a woman's troubles. Just don't go thinking you bought yourself a clean conscience. Jesse stared at him. I didn't come for conscience. Crane stepped back up onto the porch, close enough now that Jesse could smell cologne fighting dust. Then what'd you come for, cowboy? You got a soft spot for widows? Or you got a need to play hero so you can sleep at night? Ruth's hand touched Jesse's sleeve, a warning. Don't bite. Jesse thought of nights he hadn't slept anyway. He looked at the deed one more time, then pushed it back across the table toward the clerk. I'm not signing, he said. The clerk's face drained. Sir, you already paid. Refund it, Jesse said. Or keep it. I don't care. But I'm not putting my name on something I don't understand. Crane's smile didn't move, but his eyes sharpened like a blade. You understand plenty, Crane said softly. You understand you just embarrassed the bank, and you understand you just told this town you don't know how things work. Jesse leaned on the table. Maybe I'm here to learn. Crane nodded as if approving a student. All right. Lesson 1. Debts don't disappear. They move. Ruth's fingers dug into Jesse's sleeve. Please, she breathed. Not here. Jesse didn't look away from Crane. Where's the real note? Crane's laugh was quiet. Bold, Jesse kept his voice steady. You want the ranch, you can bid fair. Crane's eyes flicked over the crowd again, calculating. Fair, he repeated, like the word tasted sour. You're not from Stillwater. No, Crane's gaze slid to Jesse's left hand. A pale line of scar tissue ran across his knuckles, old and thick, the kind that came from rope burn or chain links. Where you from then? Crane asked. Jesse heard it for what it was, not curiosity. A hook. He didn't answer. Crane's smile returned, satisfied. No matter. Lesson 2. Silence doesn't protect you. It just makes it easier for folks to guess wrong. Crane leaned in, voice dropping so only Jesse and Ruth heard. You paid a debt you don't understand, Crane murmured. Now you're standing between me and what I'm owed. So you got 2 choices. His eyes slid to Ruth's bruise. Sign the deed and own the problem, Crane whispered, or walk away and let the widow handle her own mess. Ruth's breath shook. Jesse saw the muscles in her jaw working like she was trying not to break. Jesse's hand curled slowly into a fist. He looked past Crane to the street. 2 of Crane's men stood by the hitching rail, pretending not to watch. Both had that easy posture of men who'd used violence enough times to stop feeling rushed about it. Jesse turned his head slightly toward Ruth. How far's your ranch? Ruth blinked, startled by the question. 5 miles, west, past the cottonwoods. Kids alone, Jesse said. Ruth nodded once. Yes. Crane's smile widened like he could taste victory. Hear that? Even the widow knows you can't fix this with money and a stiff jaw. Jesse straightened slowly. He didn't reach for the pen. He reached for his hat. Crane's eyes narrowed. That's right. Ride on out. Forget you ever saw her." Jessie looked at Ruth. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't let the tears fall, not in front of them. "Get home," Jessie said to her. "Right now." Ruth stared. "What?" "Get your children inside," Jessie said. "Bar the door. Don't open it for anyone." Crane's voice turned sharp. "Now hold on. You giving orders on my porch?" Jessie didn't look at him. "And if I'm not back by sundown," Jessie added to Ruth, "you take the kids and you run north to the old railroad cut. Stay in the trees. Don't take the road." Ruth's lips parted. Fear flashed. "You don't even know." "I know enough," Jessie said. "Go." Ruth hesitated. Then she moved, quick, decisive, down the steps and into the crowd. Folks shifted away from her like fear was catching. Crane's hand shot out and caught her wrist. Ruth froze. Crane smiled at her, still pleasant, still gentle. "Now, Ruth," he said, voice sweet as rot, "you and I ain't finished talking." Jessie's body moved before his mind did. His hand closed around Crane's wrist, hard. Crane's smile didn't drop, but his eyes flashed. "Careful," Jessie's voice came out like gravel. "Let her go." The crowd went quiet in that way that meant everyone wanted to watch, but didn't want to be seen watching. Crane leaned in close, still holding Ruth, still smiling. "You touch me again," Crane whispered, "and I'll make sure that ranch becomes the place folks point at when they want their children to behave." Ruth's throat bobbed. She tried to pull free. Jessie didn't loosen his grip. "Let her go." Crane's eyes slid past Jessie's shoulder. One of Crane's men stepped forward, hand low near his gun. The air tightened. Dust hung still. Crane sighed like Jessie was tiring him. Then he released Ruth's wrist. Ruth stumbled back a step, rubbing the red mark blooming on her skin. She didn't wait. She turned and started walking fast, head down, through the street. Crane watched her go, then looked at Jessie with the same calm smile. "Lesson 3, Crane said softly. "You don't put yourself between a man and what he owns." Jessie's grip finally released Crane's wrist. Crane adjusted his cuff as if nothing had happened. "You want to play savior, cowboy? Fine, I'll let you." Crane stepped closer, so close Jessie could see the little flecks of gold in his eyes that didn't belong in a good man's face. "Because the moment you ride out to that ranch," Crane whispered, "you'll learn who Ruth really owes." Jessie held Crane's gaze. "And who's that?" Crane's smile sharpened. "You," Crane said. "Now." Jessie's stomach dropped. Crane turned his head slightly toward the clerk. "File the sale," Crane said aloud for everyone to hear. "Under my name." The clerk's eyes went wide. "But, sir, Crane's smile never broke. "You heard me." Jessie's blood went cold. He looked down at the deed again. The clerk's hand was already sliding a second paper out from under the first. Another deed, already filled, already waiting. A trap set before Jessie ever rode into town. Crane leaned in one last time, voice so low it was almost kind. "You paid the wrong man," Crane repeated, using Ruth's own words like a knife. "And now you owe the right one." Jessie's hand went to his belt, not for his gun, but for the small worn locket he kept there, hidden under leather. He didn't open it. He just felt it, like touching a grave marker. Then he heard it. Not words, just a sound. A single, sharp scream from somewhere down the street. A child's scream. Ruth's ranch was 5 miles west, and Stillwater's road ran straight that way. Jessie's eyes snapped to Crane's men at the hitching rail, both already swinging into their saddles. Crane smiled as if he'd just been proven right about the world. Jessie didn't draw his gun. He ran. He hit the porch steps hard, boots thudding, shoulders slamming a man aside, not caring who he offended, not caring about the crowd. He vaulted into the street and grabbed his horse's reins. Crane's voice drifted after him, light and amused. "Ride fast, cowboy!" Jessie swung into the saddle in one violent motion and kicked the horse forward, dust exploding under the hooves. And as he tore out of Stillwater, the scream came again, closer now, and Jessie saw a small figure in the road ahead, waving both arms, mouth open, face streaked with tears, and behind her, smoke lifting into the sky from the direction of Ruth Calhoun's ranch, and the child's voice finally broke into words. "They got Mama!" Jessie reined in hard, his horse skidding sideways in the rutted street, dust blasting up around the girl's bare ankles. She couldn't have been more than 8, hair half braided, half torn loose, one sleeve ripped clean off. Easy, Jesse said, voice low, reaching down. What's your name? She slapped at his hand like it burned. Lila, they got Mama. Her eyes kept darting past him, back toward town, like she expected riders to pour out any second. Jesse followed her stare. 2 men, Crane's men, already moving, not running, never running, just walking fast with the kind of patience that came from knowing no one stopped them. Jesse's mind snapped into the old shape it used to have. Count the angles, count the exits, count the seconds. He leaned down, caught Lila under the arms, and hauled her up in front of him. She weighed almost nothing, all bone and fear. Hold the horn, he told her. Do not let go. I gotta go back. My sisters, you go back and you die, Jesse said, not unkind, just true. We're going to them. He dug his heels into the horse. The animal surged forward, hooves striking sparks off stone. Behind them, a voice cut the air, Crane's carrying down the street like a church bell. Don't hurt the child. It was a lie told for an audience. Stillwater had plenty of people who needed to believe it. Jesse didn't look back. He kept his eyes on the road west, where the town thinned into scrub and cottonwoods, and the wind got louder than men. Lila clung to the saddle horn with white knuckles. Her small body shook so hard, Jesse could feel it through leather. Tell me exactly, Jesse said. How many? Her words came out in broken pieces. 2 riders, then a wagon. They came fast. Mama told us to go inside, but they were all ready. She made a sound like she swallowed something sharp. Jesse kept his voice steady. Where are your sisters? At the house, in the pantry. Mama said, she swallowed again. Mama said don't open for nobody. Then she went out with the shotgun. Jesse's jaw tightened. A woman with a shotgun could buy time, but time was what men like Crane stole first. Smoke rose ahead, thin at first, then thicker. Not a barn fire, not a brush fire, a house fire. Jesse pushed his horse harder, feeling the animal's breath go hot beneath him. He took the path through cottonwoods instead of the straight road, knowing Crane's men would take the road because they liked their boots clean and their kills easy. The ranch came into view in pieces, fence posts, a windmill, a low roofline through the trees, and then the smell hit. Burnt pine, burnt lard, burnt hair. Lila made a choking noise. That's our kitchen! Jesse slid off the horse before it fully stopped, lifted her down, and shoved her behind the thick trunk of a cottonwood. Stay, he ordered. If you move, I can't save anybody. She shook her head, tears streaking down her cheeks. Please, stay, he repeated, and in his voice there was something that made her obey. He moved low along the fence line, keeping the smoke to his back. The yard looked wrong. Too many tracks. Wagon ruts cut deep. The gate hung open, one hinge bent like a broken arm. The kitchen door was burning, flames licking along the frame, but the main house still stood, shutters closed, curtains drawn. A man's laugh drifted from the barn. Jesse crouched, palm sliding to his revolver. He didn't draw yet. A gun was loud. Loud brought more. He edged toward the side of the house, staying in shadow. Voices. 2 men, maybe 3. Rough, casual, talking like they were loading feed sacks. Crane said, leave the boy. Girl's worth more. That widow got teeth, though. Not anymore. The words hit Jesse like a whip. He breathed in, breathed out, and made himself quiet again. He slid to the back window. The glass was smeared from inside. Small handprints. A child had been pressed there, watching. He tapped once, soft. A code no one taught him, but children understood. I'm here. Don't scream. A face appeared behind the curtain. A girl, older than Lila, eyes wide and wet, mouth trembling. She didn't open the curtain fully. Smart. Jesse leaned in close to the frame, barely moving his lips. How many are inside with you? The girl shook her head fast, then held up 2 fingers. 2 girls inside, Lila outside. That made 3. And a boy. Ruth had said a boy. Where's your brother? Jesse mouthed. The girl's chin dropped. She pointed toward the barn. Jesse's blood went cold. He looked toward the barn again. The big doors were open. Smoke rolled from one corner where hay had been kicked over and set alight. Small fire, controlled. A threat, not a mistake. Then he saw the boy, tied to the rail inside, hands bound behind him, face streaked with dirt. His head hung, but he was alive. Jesse could see his chest moving. A man stood near him, turning a knife in his fingers like it was a toy. The man wasn't Crane. Jesse knew Crane's posture, Crane's polished cruelty. This was a different kind. Lean, weathered, a scar down the side of his face like someone had once tried to tear the evil out and failed. Jesse slipped along the back wall to the corner of the house. He had one clear shot from here, but if he fired, the man with the knife might cut the boy before Jesse could cross the yard. So Jesse did what he hated most. He stepped out. Boots in open ground. He raised his hands, palms out, as if surrendering. "Easy," Jesse called, loud enough for them to hear, calm enough to sound like he belonged there. "You fellas looking for me?" The men turned as one, 3 of them, 2 with rifles, 1 with a short-barreled shotgun. The knife man didn't move toward Jesse. He moved closer to the boy. "Who the hell are you?" one rifleman barked. Jesse kept walking, slow, measured. "Name's Cole. Jesse Cole." The knife man's eyes narrowed. "Cole?" Jesse felt it, the shift, like he'd stepped on a buried board and heard the nail squeal. The shotgun man laughed. "Well, I'll be. We got ourselves a famous man." Jesse didn't smile. "Let the kid go." Knife man tilted his head. "And why would we do that?" "Because you don't want this to get messy." The rifleman snorted. Too late. From behind Jesse, the house window creaked. A small gasp. Jesse didn't turn. He spoke louder, as if he didn't care who listened. "Crane send you?" Jesse asked. Knife man's grin showed bad teeth. "Crane don't send us. Crane just pays. We work for whoever's got coin and cents." "And today," Jesse said, "that's Crane." Knife man stepped forward a half pace, still keeping the boy within arm's reach. "Today that's you." Jesse's heartbeat didn't change. His spine did. It went colder. "Me?" Jesse said. Knife man's grin widened. "Auction money, big bag, heavy. Crane wants it, but not for himself." The rifleman on the right spat. "He wants it so he can pay the man you really owe." Jesse's eyes flicked just once to the wagon ruts. Whoever else had come out here had left in a hurry, but not empty. "Where's Ruth?" Jesse asked. Shotgun man shrugged. "Widow's in the wagon, alive, for now." The boy made a small sound, muffled, like he tried to speak through a gag. Jesse kept his gaze on the knife. "Tell Crane to come himself." Knife man laughed softly. "Crane ain't coming. Crane's already done his part. He put you on the hook. Now he's stepping back to watch you drown." Jesse's mind flashed, sharp. The second deed. The clerk. The way Crane said, "You owe me now." It was never about buying the ranch. It was about making Jesse visible, making him step into the light. Knife man watched Jesse's face like he was reading a newspaper. "There it is," he said. "You're starting to remember." Jesse's jaw clenched. "Remember what?" Knife man's voice dropped, almost friendly. "Who you used to be." Jesse heard hooves, not behind him, farther out on the road. He didn't turn. He listened. 2 riders, maybe more. The rifleman glanced toward the sound, restless. Knife man didn't look. He didn't need to. "That your boys?" Jesse asked. Knife man shook his head slowly. "No, that's the men you owe. The ones Crane promised you'd come running right to." Jesse felt Lila behind the cottonwood in his mind like a spark. He felt the girls in the pantry like a locked box. He felt the boy tied to the rail like a target. He'd walked into a trap, and they'd set it around children so he couldn't shoot his way out. "Listen," Jesse said, and there was steel under it now. "Take the money. Take the ranch. Take whatever story you came here to tell yourself. Just leave the family." Shotgun man laughed again. "You think this is about the ranch?" Knife man raised the knife slightly. The boy flinched. "This is about your debt," the knife man said, "and it ain't money." The hooves got closer. A wagon creaked. Voices carried on the wind. Men calling to each other, casual as if they were coming to a picnic. Jesse moved his weight a hair to his left. The rifleman mirrored him. The shotgun man shifted, bringing the barrel up. Knife man watched Jesse's hands. "Don't," he warned. Jesse's voice went quiet. "What do they want?" Knife man's eyes shone with a mean kind of pleasure. "They want you to kneel." Jesse stared. "They want you to beg," Knife man continued, "because a long time ago you made somebody beg and they've been waiting." Jesse's mouth went dry. A shadow crossed the barn door, another rider pulling up, then another, a third. One dismounted slow, like he owned the dirt. Jesse didn't have to see the man's face to feel the shift in the air. The others went a half step still. Even the knife man's grin tightened, respectful. The newcomer walked into the barn in a black coat that had no dust on it, like he didn't let the frontier touch him. His boots were expensive, his hat brim low. He stopped just inside and lifted his head. Jesse met his eyes, and something in Jesse's chest caved inward. Because Jesse knew him, not by name, by consequence. The man looked Jesse over like he was inspecting livestock. Then his gaze drifted to the boy tied to the rail, and he smiled. Small, polite. Always did like leverage, the man said. Jesse's throat tightened. Who are you? The man's smile didn't change. You don't recognize me? Jesse's mind flickered. Dust, rope, screaming in a canyon, a face turned away, a hand reaching out. The man took one slow step closer. I recognize you, he said softly. Jesse Cole. The man who disappeared after the Silverton job went bad. The man who left bodies and a promise. Jesse's fingers flexed. I didn't. You did, the man cut in, voice still calm. Maybe you told yourself you didn't. Maybe you buried it under new names and good deeds. He nodded toward the burning kitchen door outside, like it was a lantern lit for them. Buying a widow's debt, the man said, amused. That's almost poetic. Jesse's voice came out rough. What do you want? The man finally looked directly at him, eyes pale and empty as winter sky. I want what you owe, he said, and I want it in front of witnesses who will remember you begged. Jesse's jaw clenched. There are children here. The man smiled wider, pleased. Yes, that's why you'll behave. Behind the man, someone hauled Ruth forward into the barn doorway. Her hands were tied, hair loose, face smeared with soot. Her collar was torn open, and the bruise on her throat had darkened to almost black. Her eyes found Jesse, and in them was fury bigger than fear. You shouldn't have come, she rasped. Jesse's chest tightened. I'm here. Ruth's mouth twisted. This is what he wanted. Crane wanted you to come. He wanted you on this land so he could hand you over like payment. The pale-eyed man chuckled. Smart widow. Ruth spat at his boots. The spit didn't reach. One of the men backhanded her so hard she staggered. Jesse took one step without thinking. Every gun lifted. Knife man's blade pressed to the boy's neck, a bright line of threat. Jesse stopped. He forced his voice level. Don't touch her again. The pale-eyed man tilted his head. Or what? You'll shoot? Jesse didn't answer. The pale-eyed man walked closer until he was only a few paces away. He smelled like soap and money and something rotten underneath. Do you remember? The man said softly. What you did to my brother? Jesse's mind flashed again. Two men on their knees, hands bound, begging. A third man lying face down in dirt, blood pooling. A younger voice crying out. Jesse's eyes narrowed, trying to hold the memory, trying to keep it from slipping away like it always did when it got too sharp. I don't remember your brother, Jesse said, and the truth of it tasted like bile. The man's smile vanished. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper, creased and worn. He held it up like a preacher with scripture. This, he said, is your promise. Jesse's gaze locked on the paper. He knew those folds. He knew that kind of paper. He'd touched it before. The man opened it, slow. A signature sat at the bottom in heavy ink. Jesse Cole. Jesse's stomach dropped. His pulse thudded once, hard enough to shake his vision. Ruth's voice broke through, urgent. Jesse, don't look at that. But he couldn't stop. The pale-eyed man's finger tapped the ink. You swore on your life, he said. You swore you'd pay, not with money, with blood. Jesse's mouth went dry. That signature. You wrote it, the man snapped, and his calm finally cracked. You looked my mother in the eye and you wrote it while my brother was still breathing. Jesse's breath caught. He heard faintly a woman's scream from far away in his head, maybe memory, maybe guilt. The pale-eyed man leaned in, voice low and vicious. So now you pay. He nodded once. Knife man yanked the boy's head back by the hair, exposing his throat. Ruth surged forward, straining against the hands holding her. No! Jesse's hand moved toward his gun on pure instinct. 3 rifles clicked. The pale-eyed man raised one hand, stopping them, eyes never leaving Jesse. Go ahead, he whispered. Draw. Give me an excuse. Jesse froze with his fingers inches from the grip. The boy's eyes met Jesse's, wide, terrified, pleading without words. Jesse's mind raced, searching for any crack in the trap, any way to move faster than their knives. Ruth's voice came out ragged. Jesse, listen to me. There's a gunshot cracked outside. Everyone flinched. Another shot, then screaming. Men shouting, horses shrieking. The pale-eyed man snapped his head toward the barn door, anger flashing. "What the hell is that?" Ruth's eyes widened with a sudden wild hope. A rider burst into view at the barn entrance, firing from the saddle. One of the riflemen spun and dropped, blood blooming on his shirt. The rider's hat flew back, and Jesse saw long hair whipping in the wind. A woman. Not Ruth. An older woman with a hard face and a rifle that looked like it had killed more men than time. "Get away from those kids!" she screamed, voice raw as gravel. The pale-eyed man's men scrambled, shouting, returning fire. The older woman fired again, clean and fast, dropping another man near the wagon. The barn filled with chaos, smoke, shouts, gunfire punching holes through old boards. Jesse's body moved, he drew. In one smooth motion, he shot the shotgun man first, center mass. Before the man could turn the barrel on the new rider, the shotgun man slammed into the stall wall and slid down. Jesse pivoted, fired again at the rifleman on the left. The bullet clipped shoulder. The man spun, screaming, dropping his weapon. Knife man jerked back, dragging the boy with him like a shield. The pale-eyed man backed away, eyes blazing, reaching for his own gun. Ruth twisted violently, elbowing the man holding her, ripping free just enough to slam her head back into his nose. The man howled, hands flying up. Ruth lunged toward the boy. Knife man shoved the boy forward, then yanked him back, blade still at his throat. Jesse aimed at Knife man's head. Knife man grinned, daring him. "Shoot," the bastard hissed. "Go on." The older woman outside fired again. A bullet ripped through the barn door, splintering wood inches from Jesse's face. The pale-eyed man shouted, "Kill the rider!" Two of his men bolted out, guns up. The older woman's horse reared. She fired from underneath it, hitting one man in the belly. The other got a shot off. The older woman jerked, rifle slipping. Ruth screamed. Jesse's blood went ice cold. The pale-eyed man saw it too and smiled, a quick flash of triumph. He lifted his gun toward Jesse. Jesse fired first. The pale-eyed man's hat flew off, bullet grazing his scalp, blood streaking down his temple. He staggered back furious, not dead. Knife man used the moment to yank the boy sideways, backing toward the rear stall door. Jesse stepped forward, tracking the knife. Ruth grabbed a pitchfork from the wall and lunged for the knife man's arm. Knife man whipped the blade out, slashing Ruth across the forearm. Blood sprayed. Ruth gasped but didn't drop the pitchfork. The boy screamed. Jesse saw the opening, a narrow one, but real. He fired at the knife man's wrist. The shot hit. Knife man howled, blade clattering to the dirt. The boy ripped free and ran, straight toward Jesse. A rifle cracked from outside. The boy's body jerked mid-step. Jesse's eyes widened, and the boy dropped like his legs were cut out from under him, face first into the dirt, not moving. Jesse hit the ground on his knees beside the boy so hard the dirt punched up into his face. The child's hat had fallen off when he went down. A thin line of blood ran from the shoulder, darkening the shirt fast. "No," Jesse said, like the word could change the math. He shoved his fingers under the boy's jaw, found a pulse. There, faint, fluttering like a moth. The boy's eyes were open but not seeing. His mouth moved once, a sound trapped behind pain. Ruth stumbled toward them, clutching her bleeding forearm, pitchfork still in her good hand. "Eli," she gasped. "Eli, baby!" A shot cracked again from outside, and splinters sprayed off the barn post above Jesse's head. Jesse pushed Ruth down by the shoulder without looking at her. "Stay low," he growled. Ruth snarled back through clenched teeth, not obeying so much as bending to reality. She pressed herself to the dirt beside Jesse, panting. Lila's older sister, Mara, Jesse guessed because Ruth had shouted it once when the pantry door creaked, appeared in the barn doorway for half a heartbeat. Her face was white, eyes huge. "Get back inside," Ruth screamed. The girl vanished. Outside, the older rider, riflewoman, had slid off her horse and was crouched behind a water trough, one hand clamped to her side where the bullet had caught her. Blood soaked her shirt. She kept firing anyway, each shot deliberate, angry. The pale-eyed man's voice cut over the chaos. "Bring the wagon around now!" men shouted back. Boots pounded, harness leather squealed. The wagon moved. Jesse could hear the creak shifting closer, trying to align for a quick grab and go. Jesse glanced up. The pale-eyed man, Elias's brother, the one with the paper, was half hidden near the barn entrance, blood on his temple, eyes burning like a man who'd been laughed at. He wasn't retreating. He was reorganizing. Knife Man was on his knees, clutching his ruined wrist, face twisted with hate. He saw Jesse looking and spat a thick gob of blood into the dirt. "You shot my hand," he hissed, like Jesse had broken some sacred rule. "You shot a child," Jesse said. Knife Man's grin was jagged. "Not dead yet." Jesse didn't answer that. He couldn't. He pressed his palm hard against the boy's wound. Blood pulsed warm through his fingers. Ruth tore a strip from her underskirt without hesitation, teeth ripping fabric, then shoved it into Jesse's hands. "Wrap it. Tight." Jesse wrapped, knots clumsy under pressure, the way a man ties rope when his hands remember doing it 100 times in a hurry. The boy, Eli, gasped once, sharp. His eyes flicked, caught Jesse's face for a fraction, then slipped. "Stay with me," Jesse said low. He didn't know if the boy could hear. He said it anyway. Ruth's eyes were wild. "They'll take him. They'll take all of them." "Not if I can help it," Jesse said. Ruth barked a laugh that wasn't laughter. "You can't help it. That's the point. That's why Crane set this." Jesse's jaw tightened. "Crane's not here." Ruth's voice dropped. "He doesn't need to be. He's watching from town, counting the ways you bleed." A rifleman limped across the barn, clutching his shoulder where Jesse's bullet had clipped him. He raised his gun one-handed, sighting on Jesse and Ruth behind the stall rail. Jesse fired without thinking. The man's knee buckled. He went down, screaming, gun clattering. Gunfire outside surged again. A man shouted, "He's in the barn! Get around back!" Jesse's head snapped toward the rear. The stall door that led into the small corral was half open, sunlight spilling through. If men got behind him, he'd be pinned between wood and iron. "Ruth," Jesse said. "Where's the cellar?" Ruth blinked through blood and smoke. "Under the pantry, trap door." "The girls—" "In there," Ruth said. "I told them." Jesse nodded once. "Good." Knife Man started to get up, teeth bared, reaching with his good hand toward the dropped knife in the dirt. Ruth surged forward and slammed the pitchfork down, pinning the knife handle to the ground like a stake. Knife Man recoiled, swearing. "You touch my boy again," Ruth spat, "and I'll feed you to the fire." Knife Man laughed through pain. "Fire's already fed." As if to prove it, the kitchen roof outside gave a loud groan. A section collapsed inward with a roar. Heat rolled through the open barn door, carrying sparks. The pale-eyed man stepped fully into view again, gun out now, coat unbuttoned. He looked at Jesse like Jesse was an old debt come home. "Time," he said calmly, as if announcing supper. "Bring them out." 2 men appeared at the barn entrance, dragging the older riflewoman by the arms. She fought, kicking, but her wound had taken her strength. They slammed her to her knees in the dirt just outside the door. Jesse's eyes narrowed. "Let her go." The pale-eyed man didn't look at Jesse. He looked at Ruth. "This your neighbor?" Ruth's face tightened. "That's Hattie Boone." Hattie's laugh was a wet cough. She lifted her chin anyway. "Ruth," she rasped, "I told you not to sign nothing in that town." Ruth's eyes flicked to Jesse for a heartbeat, bitter agreement. The pale-eyed man stepped closer to Hattie, placed his gun's muzzle under her chin, gentle as a kiss. "A hero," he said, amused. "I love heroes. They make the begging sound honest." Hattie spat blood to the side. "You ain't getting a prayer from me," the man smiled. "Not you. Him." He tipped his head toward Jesse. Jesse stood slowly, keeping his revolver down but ready. He moved just enough to block the boy's body from view. "You want me?" Jesse said. "Come in and take me." The pale-eyed man's eyes slid to the floor where Eli lay, wrapped in Ruth's torn cloth. "You'll stand where I tell you, or I'll finish the child. Then I'll take the girls out of that house one by one until your spine turns soft." Ruth made a strangled sound and started forward. Jesse grabbed her wrist and held her back. Ruth's eyes blazed. "Let me go." "Not like this," Jesse said. Ruth yanked against him. "Not like what? Like dying. We're already dead if you listen to him." Jesse's grip tightened, not hurting, just anchoring. "Ruth, listen." Her chest heaved. "No, you listen. You don't know what men like that do." Jesse's voice went flat. "I do." That stopped her, just a fraction. Her eyes searched his face, saw something there she hadn't wanted to see. The pale-eyed man watched their exchange like he was enjoying a play. Then he nodded once. "Good," he said. "Bring the widow and the cowboy out. Tie them. We do it proper." His men stepped into the barn. Jesse's finger tightened on the trigger, then released. He didn't shoot. Not yet. If he shot now, they'd shoot the girls in the house out of spite, or burn the whole place down with them inside. He needed one clean move that ended it. He needed something he didn't have. Ruth's gaze flicked to the back of the barn, where the hayloft ladder rose into shadow. Her eyes narrowed, thinking fast. Jessie followed her glance. The loft. A place to move unseen, maybe. A place with a rope pulley. A place with weight overhead. Ruth's lips moved barely. Lantern. Jessie saw it then, an oil lantern hanging from a nail near the ladder, glass already soot-stained. Beneath it, spilled hay. Dry. Ready. Ruth's eyes met his. A plan, desperate and ugly. The pale-eyed man's men closed in, boots crunching on straw. Jessie spoke loud enough for them to hear, calm, surrendering. "All right." Ruth's breath hitched, shocked. Jessie squeezed her wrist once, a message. "Trust me." He stepped forward with his hands lifted slowly, revolver still in his right hand but lowered and turned sideways so it wasn't obvious. His posture said surrender. His eyes said calculation. One of the men, tall with a red bandana, grinned. "That's better." As he reached for Jessie's gun, Jessie let it happen. He let the man's fingers brush the barrel. Then, Jessie drove his forehead into the man's nose. Cartilage crunched, blood sprayed. The man screamed and staggered back. In the same motion, Jessie pivoted and fired low, one shot into the knee of the second man stepping in. The man dropped with a howl. Before the pale-eyed man could react, Ruth lunged for the lantern, ripped it from the nail, and smashed it against the barn wall. Oil splashed like black water. Flame bloomed instantly, licking along spilled hay. Heat surged. Men shouted, startled. Smoke thickened fast. Ruth grabbed Jessie's sleeve. "Move!" Jessie spun back to Eli, scooped the boy up with a grunt, the child limp and heavy now in the worst way, and shoved the boy into Ruth's arms. "Take him," Jessie ordered. "House, cellar." Ruth's eyes widened. "I can't." "You can," Jessie snapped. "You will." She clenched her jaw and took Eli, cradling him against her chest like she could shield him from bullets with her body. Jessie fired twice toward the barn entrance, not to kill, to force heads down. One man screamed. Another dove behind a post. The pale-eyed man shouted, furious, "Don't let them out!" But the fire had changed the rules. Men backed away from the flames instinctively. Smoke stung their eyes. Ruth sprinted, carrying Eli, moving low through the stall gap and out the side door that led toward the house. Jessie followed, covering her, coughing as smoke rolled around his head. Outside, Hattie Boone was still on her knees, held by two men. Her face was gray with pain. She looked up as Jessie burst out. "Cowboy!" she barked. "Don't you run!" Jessie's gaze cut to her. "I'm not." He fired at the man holding Hattie's right arm. The bullet punched through his shoulder. The man screamed and released her. Hattie lunged, headbutting the second man hard enough to stagger him. Even wounded, she was mean as a badger. "Go!" Hattie shouted at Jessie. "Get them kids!" Jessie nodded once, then sprinted toward the house, boots pounding, revolver up. Behind him, the barn fire roared louder, climbing fast. The pale-eyed man shouted orders through the smoke, voice sharpening with panic. Jessie hit the back porch. The door was barred from inside. "Good." "Ruth!" he shouted. The door cracked open just enough for Ruth's face to appear, smeared with soot, eyes wide. She dragged Eli inside. "Cellar," she gasped. "Girls are already down." Jessie shoved in behind her and slammed the door. He threw the bar back into place, shoulders heaving. The house interior smelled like fear and boiled beans and smoke seeping through cracks. Ruth moved fast, pulling up the pantry rug, fingers finding the trap-door ring. "Help me," she said. Jessie grabbed the ring and hauled. The door creaked open, revealing darkness and the damp smell of earth. Two faces looked up from below, Mara and her younger sister, cheeks streaked with tears, eyes huge. "Mama!" they cried. Ruth climbed down first with Eli, careful, trembling. Then Jessie followed, dropping into the cellar and pulling the trapdoor back over them, leaving only a sliver of light between boards. The cellar was cramped, lined with jars and sacks. A few potatoes had spilled. A mouse scurried. Ruth laid Eli on an old blanket. His breathing was shallow, lips pale. Ruth pressed her bleeding arm against her body and used her other hand to touch his face, shaking. "Eli, Eli, look at me." Eli didn't. Mara sobbed silently, covering her sister's mouth to keep her quiet. Jessie crouched near the cellar wall, listening. Outside, boots thudded on porch boards, men shouting. the crackle of the barn fire like a beast chewing. The pale-eyed man's voice cut through it all. Close now. Search the house, they're here. Ruth's eyes darted to Jesse, terror returning full force. Jesse's mind raced. No back exit. Small window maybe, but too small, too high. He felt in his coat pocket and found what he'd forgotten about all day. A single stick of dynamite, wrapped in cloth, old fuse coiled tight. He'd carried it since before he became a man who paid debts instead of making them. Ruth saw his hand. Her eyes widened. "What is that?" Jesse didn't answer. He listened again. A boot hit the front door. Once, twice. Wood groaned. The girls clutched each other. Ruth's voice shook. "Jesse, don't." Jesse pulled the cloth away just enough to reveal the red paper. He looked at Ruth. "How far is the well from the house?" Ruth swallowed. 10 yards, maybe. "And the root cellar vent?" Jesse asked, scanning the cellar ceiling. "You got one?" Ruth pointed to a small iron grate near the top of the wall, half hidden behind stacked jars. Jesse nodded. He moved to it, quiet, pried at it with his knife until the screws squealed. It loosened just enough. Outside, the front door splintered. A man shouted, "Inside!" Ruth covered her daughter's heads, pulling them close. Jesse pressed his mouth close to Ruth's ear, voice steady. "When I say go, you take the girls and you crawl to the vent. You push them out first, then you run to the cottonwoods. Do not stop." Ruth's eyes went glossy. "And you?" Jesse didn't lie. "I'll buy you time." Ruth's jaw trembled. "You'll die." Jesse's face stayed still. "Maybe?" Ruth shook her head violently, whispering fierce. No, you started this. You don't get to." A heavy boot slammed down on the pantry floor above them. Boards creaked. Dust sifted down like dirty snow. A man's voice, right above the trap door. "I smell smoke," another voice answered, laughing. "That's the barn, idiot." "No," the first voice said. "This is close." The trap door ring clinked as a hand found it. Ruth clapped a hand over Mara's mouth as the girl started to sob louder. Jesse struck a match against his boot heel, shielding the tiny flame in his palm like it was a secret. The fuse end waited. Jesse's heart thudded once, hard the way it did before a cliff. The trap door above them lifted an inch. Light knifed into the cellar. A face appeared in the crack, dirty, grinning. "There you are," the man whispered. Jesse touched the match to the fuse. It hissed alive. In the same instant, Jesse shoved the dynamite up through the crack, straight into the pantry above. The man's grin turned to confusion. "What?" Jesse slammed the trapdoor shut with both hands and threw his weight on it. The fuse sizzled above them. Ruth's scream caught in her throat. Jesse locked eyes with her. "Now." Ruth grabbed Mara and the younger girl, shoved them toward the vent, hands shaking but moving. Mara squeezed through first, wriggling into daylight. The younger girl followed, sobbing silently. Ruth turned back for Eli. Jesse grabbed the boy's blanket and hauled him into Ruth's arms. "Go!" Ruth climbed, half crawling, pushing Eli up through the vent with her daughters helping from outside. Jesse stayed under the trap door, bracing it, muscles shaking as men above began pounding on it. "Open it!" someone shouted. "Get it open!" Wood groaned. Nails squealed. The fuse sound became a furious hiss. Jesse's breath came in short bursts. He pressed his forehead to the underside of the door, eyes squeezed shut for half a heartbeat, then opened them and looked into the dark. He thought of the paper with his signature. He thought of the promise he didn't remember making, and the fact that it existed anyway. He thought of Crane smiling on the courthouse steps. Above him, the pounding became frantic as someone realized what the sound meant. "Move!" a voice screamed. "Move!" Jesse's fingers dug into the wood, holding it down like he could hold down fate. The fuse reached its end, and the world turned white. The blast didn't sound like thunder. It sounded like the world tearing itself off its hinges. The cellar ceiling bucked. Dirt rained down in a hot rush. Jesse felt the trapdoor jerk upward, then slam back as something heavy collapsed on it from above. The shock punched the air out of his lungs and threw him sideways into stacked jars. Glass shattered. Pickle brine and dust splashed across his face. For a second, he couldn't see anything but white and sparks. Then the white went away, replaced by black. He lay still, waiting to find out if he was dead. A low ringing filled his skull, like a bell struck too hard. He tried to breathe and only managed a wet cough. Smoke burned down his throat. His ears popped, and the ringing thinned enough for sound to return in pieces. Fire crackling, wood collapsing, distant shouting. He forced himself up on one elbow. Pain lanced through his ribs and shoulder. His left hand came away slick. Not blood, pickle brine and soot mostly. He blinked hard, clearing grit. The vent grate was gone. Daylight poured through a jagged opening where the iron had been, along with cold air and a gust of smoke being sucked out. The girls had made it. Ruth had made it. Jesse crawled toward the wall beneath the vent. The pantry above was gone. The floorboards had splintered. What remained sagged like a broken jaw. Beams cracked and leaning into the hole. He could hear men coughing and swearing above, not in the house anymore, outside, in the yard, confused and scattered. He didn't have time to be relieved. Men like that didn't stop because they got hurt. They just got meaner. Jesse wedged his shoulders under the vent opening and shoved. The hole was too small for comfort. Splinters dug into his coat. He shoved again, teeth gritted, and felt the world scrape past him. For a moment his ribs caught and he almost panicked. Almost. Then he exhaled hard and slid through. He fell out into the cold air behind the house, landing on his hands and knees in mud and ash. The yard looked like a war had been argued there. The kitchen was a black shell, flames still licking at beams. The barn was an orange mouth roaring into the sky. Half the roof already collapsed. Smoke rolled across the pasture, turning the cottonwoods into ghosts. Horses screamed somewhere beyond the trees. Jesse got to his feet, hunched, and staggered toward the cottonwoods. His head still rang. His vision pulsed at the edges. He followed the nearest cover, low fencing and wagon ruts, moving by instinct. At the tree line he saw them. Ruth was crouched behind a thick trunk, both girls pressed against her sides, their faces smeared with dirt and tears. Eli lay on the ground beside them on a blanket, chest barely moving. Hattie Boone was there too, sitting with her back against the tree, one hand clamped to her bleeding side, the other holding her rifle across her lap like a promise. Ruth's eyes snapped up when Jesse emerged. Her face went slack with shock. She'd already decided he was dead. "Jesse?" He lifted one hand to quiet her, not because he didn't want her voice, but because sound carried. Hattie's gaze sharpened. "Hell," she rasped, "you're hard to kill." Jesse dropped to a knee beside Eli. The boy's skin was clammy. His lips had gone pale blue at the edges. Jesse pressed 2 fingers to the child's neck again. The pulse was still there, weaker now. "We have to move," Jesse said. Ruth's voice was raw. "He's dying." "I know," Jesse said, and the flatness of his voice scared even him. He looked up. "Where's the well? Where's the road cut?" Ruth blinked like she had to pull herself out of grief to answer. "Well's by the windmill. Road cut is north, half a mile through the trees." Hattie coughed and spat red into the dirt. "They'll search the trees. They got dogs in that wagon. I heard 'em earlier." Ruth flinched. "Dogs?" Hattie nodded once, grim. "Crane's men don't bring dogs. These men do." Jesse's stomach tightened. "Then we can't leave a clean trail." Ruth's eyes flicked to Eli. "We can't." Jesse slid his hands under the boy, lifting him carefully. Eli's head lolled against Jesse's shoulder, too light, too limp. Jesse could feel the boy's breathing against his neck like a weak breeze. Ruth grabbed the blanket and wrapped it around Eli tighter, her hands moving fast, desperate, competent. She didn't cry now. Her face had gone hard. Mara, older girl, clutched her sister's hand and looked at Jesse with something that wasn't fear anymore. It was a child's sudden knowledge that adults were not gods. "Is Mama going to die?" the younger one whispered. Ruth's jaw clenched. She couldn't answer. Jesse did. "Not if we keep moving." Hattie pushed herself up with a grunt, rifle in hand. "You got a horse?" Jesse shook his head. "They'll have mine." Hattie's mouth twisted. "Then we steal one." The wind shifted. Smoke thinned for a second, and Jesse saw movement through the trees back toward the house. Men spreading out in a line, rifles up, scanning. One of them carried a coil of rope. Another had a lantern, even though it was daytime. The pale-eyed man would be among them, calm in the middle of the mess, promising pain for anyone who disappointed him. "Go," Jesse whispered. They moved north through the cottonwoods, not running, because running made noise and left sloppy tracks. Jesse led, stepping on rocks when he could, in patches of dead leaves, avoiding wet ground. Ruth followed tight behind, her hand on Mara's shoulder, the younger girl sandwiched between them. Hattie brought up the rear, limping, rifle ready. Every few steps Jesse looked down at Eli. The boy's breath was still there, still shallow, still fighting. They reached a shallow creek bed. mostly dry, water only in small pools under stones. Jesse didn't hesitate. He stepped into it and followed the rocky channel, letting the creek swallow their prints. Ruth caught on instantly and guided the girls into the bed behind him. Hattie swore softly as cold water hit her boot, then followed anyway. Behind them, a shout rose from the direction of the house, angry, frustrated. "They're gone!" Then another voice, colder and closer to command. "Track them!" The word hit Jesse like a hand on the back of his neck. He pushed forward faster, careful not to jostle Eli too much. The boy's face rested against Jesse's shoulder. Jesse could feel his heartbeat fluttering through the blanket like a bird trapped in cloth. Ruth leaned forward, whispering into Jesse's ear. "Who is he?" Jesse kept his eyes on the creek bed. "The man in the black coat?" "Yes." Jesse swallowed. His throat was raw from smoke. "Not from here." Ruth's voice sharpened. "No one like that is from here." Jesse didn't answer immediately. He didn't want to speak the name that was starting to form in his head, because naming something made it real. Hattie, hearing them, huffed through pain. "That's Rourke," she rasped. "Alden Rourke." Jesse stopped so fast Ruth nearly bumped him. He turned his head slightly toward Hattie. "You know him?" Hattie's eyes were bloodshot and steady. "Everybody who's been alive long enough knows of him. He buys men the way other folks buy cattle, and he's got a memory like a ledger." Ruth's mouth tightened. "He said Jesse owed him." Hattie looked at Jesse like she was seeing him for the first time in full daylight. "You do?" Jesse started walking again, because standing still was death. "I don't know," he said, and the honesty in it made his stomach churn. "But he has paper with my name." Ruth's voice went thin. "How could you not know?" Jesse's jaw worked. "Because I spent years making sure I didn't." They moved deeper into the creek channel as it cut north. The trees thinned and the land opened into a stretch of low scrub with an old railroad cut beyond, an artificial trench through stone, half collapsed, overgrown with weeds. It was a scar on the earth, deep enough to hide in. As they approached, Jesse heard it, faint, distant at first, a low baying. Dogs. Ruth heard it too. Her eyes widened. The girls pressed closer to her sides. Mara's breathing came fast, trying to be quiet and failing. Hattie spat again. "Told you." Jesse's mind snapped into plan. "Into the cut," he whispered. "Down. Stay low." They dropped into the trench, sliding down loose dirt and rock. Jesse half fell, protecting Eli's body with his own. He hit the bottom hard, pain flaring through his ribs, but he didn't let it slow him. The cut ran north-south, narrow enough that sound echoed. Jesse moved them into a pocket where a collapsed section created a shallow cave of stone and rotted timber. "Here," he murmured. "Back in." Ruth pulled the girls into the shadow. Hattie settled with a groan, rifle across her knees, eyes on the open trench. Jesse laid Eli down carefully on the blanket. The boy's eyelids fluttered, his lips parted. A small, broken breath came out. Ruth immediately knelt beside him, pressing her palm to his forehead, then to his chest, as if willing him to stay. "Eli," she whispered, "Mama's here." Eli's eyes opened just a crack. For a second, he focused on Ruth's face. His mouth moved. Ruth leaned closer, trembling. "What, baby? What is it?" Eli's voice was barely air. "The paper." Ruth froze. "What paper?" Eli's eyes shifted weakly toward Jesse. "He took it." Jesse leaned in. "Who took it, son?" Eli swallowed with effort, pain flashing across his face. "Crane's man, the one with the red bandana. He grabbed it from Mama's." His breath hitched, and Ruth's hand flew to his chest. "From Mama's what?" Jesse pressed, gentle but urgent. Eli's eyes rolled slightly, fighting to stay present. "From the Bible?" Ruth's face drained. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Jesse stared at her. "Ruth," her voice came out cracked. "My husband, Cal, he kept papers in it, deeds, notes, letters." She swallowed hard. "He said if anything happened to him, the Bible was safer than a safe." Hattie's eyes narrowed. "So the real note might have been in your house the whole time." Ruth's breath shook. "Not might have, it was." Jesse's head rang again, but this time not from the explosion, from understanding. "That's why Crane pushed the bank sale," Jesse said quietly. "He didn't care about the deed. He cared about flushing out whatever Cal left." Ruth stared at Jesse like he'd struck her. "Cal knew." Jesse kept his voice low. Cal knew enough to hide something that mattered, something that could hurt Crane. Ruth's eyes went wet again, not with fear but with rage. Then why did Cal die? Hattie's voice was bitter. Because men like Crane don't let you hold secrets for free. The dogs were closer now. Their baying echoed along the trench. Jesse lifted his head, listening. He could hear men too, boots on rock, low voices, the clink of metal. "They'll use the cut to funnel us," Hattie murmured. "Drive us north like rabbits." Jesse scanned the collapsed timbers above their pocket. Old wood, rotten but heavy. He looked down at his belt. His revolver had only a few rounds left. He had no dynamite now. The blast had been his last stick. Ruth's voice shook, low. "What do we do?" Jesse's mind held two things at once, Eli dying on the blanket and men with dogs closing in. He chose movement again. "We can't outrun dogs," he said. "We make them stop." Hattie's mouth twisted. "With what? Harsh words?" Jesse looked at the girls. Mara was watching him like she was memorizing his face. The younger girl's eyes were squeezed shut, lips moving in silent prayer. Jesse's gaze returned to the timbers. "We collapse the cut behind us." Hattie studied the wood, understanding dawning. "That'll bury us if we're wrong." "We won't be wrong," Jesse said, though he wasn't sure. Ruth's voice went flat. "My son can't be carried forever." Jesse crouched beside Eli and checked the bandage. Blood had soaked through. Not pumping now, but still leaking life. He looked at Ruth. "Can he walk?" Ruth's face crumpled. "No." Jesse nodded once. "Then I carry him." Ruth's eyes flashed. "You'll slow down." Jesse's voice hardened. "Then we slow down together." Hattie grunted approval that sounded like pain. The dogs were very close now. Jesse could hear them sniffing, claws clicking on rock. Hattie lifted her rifle, bracing it against her shoulder. "When they show, I shoot the dogs first." Ruth stiffened. "You better a dog dead than a child," Hattie snapped. Jesse lifted Eli again, settling the boy against his chest, trying to keep his movements smooth. Eli made a small sound, not a cry, more like a breath caught on the way out. Ruth pressed her lips to Eli's hair for a second, one quick kiss, and then she pulled her daughters forward. They moved north through the trench, deeper, away from the pocket. The cut narrowed and rose in places, stone walls damp and slick. Old rails lay half buried in dirt like ribs. Ahead, the trench bent slightly and opened to a section where the stone roof had cracked long ago, leaving a slab hanging overhead, supported by a cluster of rotten wooden braces. Jesse stopped beneath it. He looked up. The slab was heavy enough to kill anything under it, and if the braces gave, it would spill rock into the trench like a landslide. He looked back. In the distance, a flicker of movement, lantern light, even in day, bobbing in the trench shadows. Men were coming in. Baying exploded louder. A dog lunged into view around the bend, black and lean, tongue hanging, eyes locked on the group. A second dog followed, then a third. Hattie fired once. The first dog spun and dropped, yelping. The others surged forward anyway. Ruth gasped and pulled her girls behind her. Jesse didn't have the luxury of fear. He stepped into the trench center, revolver up, and fired at the second dog. It went down hard. The third dog skidded, then kept coming, maddened. Hattie fired again. Missed. Her hand shook from blood loss. The dog was almost on them when Jesse fired his last clean shot. The dog collapsed, sliding in dirt. For half a second, silence. Then men's voices, furious, closer. "You killed the dogs! Light the cut! Burn them out!" Hattie's eyes widened. "They'll smoke us." Ruth's face went tight with panic. Jesse looked up at the rotten braces again, then at the stone slab hanging overhead. He shifted Eli higher on his chest, locked him with one arm, and with his free hand he drew his knife. He stepped to the nearest brace and drove the knife into the wood, chopping hard where rot was darkest. The brace splintered. Hattie stared. "That won't be enough." Jesse didn't answer. He chopped again, faster. Another brace cracked. The slab overhead groaned, dust sifting down in a thin stream. Ruth grabbed Mara's arm. "Move," she hissed, pulling the girls north, away from Jesse. Hattie limped after them, but she didn't take her eyes off Jesse. "You better know what you're doing, cowboy." Jesse chopped a third brace. The wood snapped like a bone. The stone slab shifted. A low grinding noise rolled down the trench like an animal waking. Jesse backed up fast, turning, carrying Eli, boots slipping on loose dirt. He lunged forward in a sprint that tore at his ribs. Behind him, the slab gave. It didn't fall all at once. It dropped, then caught, then dropped again, as if the earth was choosing where to break. Then it came down in full. The trench shook. Rock slammed into rock with a violent crack. Dust exploded, a choking wall that surged after Jesse like smoke. He ran through it, half blind, hearing the collapse continue behind him as more stone broke loose and spilled, sealing the cut. Men screamed on the far side, surprised, trapped, angry. Jesse stumbled into the clearer air farther north and dropped to one knee, coughing hard. Eli pressed against him. The boy's breath was a thin flutter. Ruth and the girls were a few yards ahead, pressed against the trench wall. Hattie was bent over, hands on her knees, wheezing. For a heartbeat, they had space. Ruth stared back into the dust cloud, then at Jesse. "You buried them." "Not all," Hattie rasped. "Rourke won't be in the front with the dogs. He'll be behind, waiting." Jesse's eyes narrowed. Hattie was right. A man like Rourke didn't chase. He collected. Ruth's voice went hollow. "Then he'll go around." Jesse looked north. The trench climbed toward open land. Beyond it, hills rolled toward a line of darker timber. Somewhere out there was the railroad trestle, the old bridge Cal had shown her once, the place kids dared each other to run across. Ruth swallowed. "There's a trestle up ahead, over the ravine." Hattie's eyes sharpened. "That's a choke point," Jesse nodded. "Then that's where we make our stand." They moved again, climbing out of the trench where the cut softened. Jesse kept Eli close, feeling the boy's breath weaken. Ruth walked beside Jesse now, not behind, her face set with the kind of focus grief creates. "Cal's Bible," Jesse said quietly. "If Crane's man took the papers," Ruth's voice was tight, "then Crane wanted them, Rourke wanted you, and my family's just bait in the middle." Jesse didn't deny it. "What was in those papers?" Ruth's throat worked. "Cal said he found something that tied Crane to deaths. Ranches burned, men vanished." Her eyes flicked to the smoke behind them. "He said if it ever came to it, the county would have to listen." Hattie snorted. "County don't listen unless someone forces them." Ruth's jaw clenched. Cal was trying to force them. Jesse felt something settle in his chest, heavy and clear. "Then we get those papers back." Ruth looked at him like he'd gone mad. "How?" Jesse kept walking. "By taking Crane." Hattie gave a low laugh that turned into a cough. "You say that like it's a chore." Jesse's eyes stayed forward. "Crane's in Stillwater, watching. He'll want to see the end of this with his own eyes." Ruth's voice dropped. "He'll come when he thinks I'm broken." Jesse nodded once. "Then we show him broken." They reached the trestle as the afternoon light began to thin under smoke. The bridge was old railroad timber spanning a deep ravine, the boards uneven, some missing. Wind moaned through it like a hollow throat. Ruth stopped at the edge, staring across. "It's the fastest way to the north timber." Hattie peered down into the ravine. "And the fastest way to fall." Jesse adjusted Eli. The boy's eyes were half open now, unfocused. Each breath looked like effort. Ruth touched Eli's cheek. "Stay with me," she whispered. Then she looked at Jesse. "If we cross, and they follow—" "They'll follow," Jesse said. Hattie's gaze swept the trestle supports. "If you got any more tricks, now's the time." Jesse looked at the timbers, at the iron bolts, at the way the bridge anchored to stone on each side. He had no dynamite, no extra ammo, just a knife and two hands and a stubbornness that had kept him alive when he shouldn't have been. He stepped onto the trestle, testing the first board. It creaked, held. Ruth guided the girls behind him, one hand on each child. Hattie came last, limping, rifle in hand. Halfway across, the wind kicked up and the bridge swayed. The younger girl sobbed quietly. Ruth whispered something fierce in her ear, and the child clenched her jaw and kept going. They reached the far side and stepped onto solid ground. Jesse exhaled, then immediately turned back to look across the ravine. Dust rose in the distance where the trench cut met open land. Shapes moved, men, not many, but enough. And among them, walking with his same calm pace, was Alden Rourke. He lifted a hand, not a wave, a signal. A rifle cracked. The bullet struck the trestle board near Ruth's feet and shattered it into splinters. Ruth screamed and yanked the girls back instinctively. Hattie dropped to a knee, aiming across the ravine. She fired once. The shot went wide. Rourke didn't flinch. He simply kept walking toward the trestle like the ravine didn't exist. Jesse's mind snapped. If Rourke crossed, they were trapped in the timber with a dying boy and 2 children. He looked down at the trestle structure, boards, nails, old bolts. Then he saw it, one main support beam on their side, cracked from age, held by a rusted iron plate and 2 thick bolts. Jesse met Ruth's eyes. "Can you shoot?" Ruth's face twisted. "I can," Jesse pointed. "See that plate? Those bolts. If we drop this end—" Ruth stared, understanding and horror colliding. "It'll fall." "It'll fall," Jesse said, "and they can't cross." Hattie's jaw tightened. "It might fall with us if you're wrong." Jesse didn't look away from the bolts. "Then don't miss." Ruth's hands shook as she raised the rifle Hattie shoved toward her. Ruth's arm was bleeding through her torn sleeve, but she braced the stock against her shoulder anyway. Across the ravine, Rourke stepped onto the first trestle board. He stopped and looked straight at Jesse, as if he wanted Jesse to understand who was making whom to this. Rourke's voice carried faintly over the wind. Calm, certain. "Bring him to me." Jesse's throat tightened. He glanced down at Eli in his arms. The boy's eyes fluttered. A breath came, then hesitated, as if deciding whether to bother. Ruth aimed at the first bolt. Her breathing came fast, ragged. "Ruth," Jesse said softly. "Now." Ruth squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out and sparked off iron. The bolt didn't break. Rourke smiled from across the ravine and took another step onto the trestle. Ruth's breath hitched, and she fired again, hands shaking harder. And the second shot punched into the timber beside the bolt, splintering wood but leaving the iron intact, and Rourke kept walking, steady as a clock, and Jesse realized in the same sick instant that the bolts weren't going to break fast enough, because someone had already reinforced the plate with fresh iron, clean and new against old wood, and only one man in Stillwater would have thought to do that. Crane. Jesse's eyes flicked along the trestle again. Old timber, new iron. Fresh reinforcement where rot should have won. Crane's fingerprints without the man ever needing to show his face. Rourke stepped forward, boots testing each board like he was walking into a church. Behind him, 2 men followed at a distance, rifles ready, using his body like a shield because they knew he'd let them. Ruth lowered the rifle half an inch, breath shaking. "I can't." "You can," Jesse said, but his voice didn't have comfort in it. It had decision. He shifted Eli in his arms, feeling how light the boy had become. The blanket smelled like smoke and blood. Eli's eyelids fluttered, then slid shut again, and his breath came shallow enough to scare even the wind. Hattie crawled closer on her knees, keeping low. "Bolts won't give," she rasped. "Not quick." Jesse stared down at the trestle's side braces, the diagonal timbers beneath the deck. The iron plate was new, but the wood around it was old. If you couldn't break the iron, you broke what it was holding. He looked at Ruth. "How good's your aim?" Ruth's jaw clenched. "Good enough to put a hole in a man." "Then put a hole in wood," Jesse said. He pointed. "That brace, under the plate. You cut that, the load shifts. The iron can't hold what it's not attached to." Ruth followed his finger, eyes narrowing, calculating. Her hands steadied just a fraction. Across the ravine, Rourke was a third of the way onto the bridge. He didn't hurry. He didn't need to. He raised his voice again, calm and infuriating. "You're tired, Cole. Give me what's mine and the family walks." Ruth made a sound in her throat like a growl. Hattie's eyes flashed. "He's lying." Jesse didn't answer Rourke. He looked down at Eli instead, and for a second, his face softened, not for the boy, but for the weight of what the boy had forced him to become again. Eli's lips moved, barely. Jesse leaned closer. The boy's voice was a thread. "Mama!" Ruth flinched like a bullet hit her. She moved toward Eli, hand reaching, then stopped because her legs didn't trust themselves. Jesse said quietly, "He needs you." Ruth swallowed hard and pressed her knuckles to her mouth, then forced herself to raise the rifle again. Her eyes went wet, then went hard. Jesse angled his body, putting Eli behind the tree line on their side of the ravine. He laid the boy down gently on the leaf litter, shielding him with his coat. "Stay," he murmured, though Eli couldn't. Mara held her sister close, both girls staring at the trestle as if it was a mouth that might swallow their mother. Hattie braced her rifle on a rock. "You got a plan that doesn't end with you dead?" Jesse's gaze didn't leave Rourke. "No." Hattie huffed a laugh that turned into a cough. Honest at least. Ruth took one breath in, one out, then aimed lower, under the deck, at the diagonal brace Jesse had pointed out. Rourke kept walking. Jesse saw the moment his eyes flicked, not to Ruth, but to Jesse, reading him like always. Rourke didn't know what Ruth was aiming at, but he knew something had changed. He stopped. The bridge creaked, settling around him. Rourke's mouth curved, almost polite. "Don't do anything heroic." Ruth squeezed the trigger. The shot punched into the brace. A chunk of aged wood exploded outward. The trestle groaned, a deeper note now, like the ravine itself was complaining. Hattie's eyes widened. "Again!" Ruth fired again. Same brace, a little higher. The wood cracked, splitting along old grain. Rourke's head turned, finally seeing what she was doing. The calm slid off his face like a glove. "Back!" he snapped at his men behind him. Too late. Ruth fired a third time. The brace gave with a sharp snap. The whole trestle shuddered. Boards jumped under Rourke's boots. One side dipped a fraction, then held on iron and stubbornness. Rourke froze, knees bending slightly, arms out, balancing with instinct that came from surviving. He didn't fall. He looked across the ravine at Jesse, anger bright now, real. "You think you can stop me with wood?" Jesse lifted his revolver, not at Rourke, at the next brace. He fired. The shot hit. The brace splintered but didn't break fully. Hattie fired too, aiming at the same spot. Her bullet punched into the wood, widening the wound. The trestle dipped again, lower now. Nails squealed. The iron plate held, but the deck around it began to tear. Rourke's men scrambled backward, cursing. Rourke didn't. He took one careful step back, then another, moving like a man walking on thin ice. He could retreat to solid ground. He could keep his calm. But then he glanced past Jesse toward the timberline behind them, toward the path that led back to Stillwater. And he smiled again, slow, because he knew something Jesse didn't. A new sound rose behind Jesse, farther back in the trees. Hooves, many, not two, not three. A small group riding hard. Jesse's spine went cold. Ruth heard it too. Her eyes widened. "No." Hattie's face tightened. "That's not Rourke's men." Through the trees behind them, shapes appeared, riders coming fast, spreading out, cutting off the timber line. At their front, in a clean vest and a silver watch chain that caught the light even through smoke, was Virgil Crane. He rode like he'd been born on a porch, not a saddle, upright, composed, smiling. He slowed just enough to look at Ruth, then at the girls, then at Eli on the ground. His smile softened in a way that made Jesse's skin crawl. "This." Crane spread his hands. "Reins this." Crane spread his hands. Reins loose. Now. I didn't do anything. I tried to help. A stranger came to town, threw money around, stirred up trouble." His eyes slid to Jesse. "And trouble found you." Jesse lifted his revolver toward Crane without thinking. Crane didn't flinch. He just looked amused. "Go on," he said softly. "Shoot me. See how far you get with Rourke still standing on that bridge." Jesse's gaze snapped back to the trestle. Rourke had retreated to the near end of the bridge, safe now on his side of the ravine, coat spotless, eyes fixed on Jesse like a promise. Crane's voice turned conversational, as if he were discussing cattle prices. "You see, Cole, I don't like owing people. And Rourke, he doesn't like waiting." He smiled wider. "So I arranged something tidy." Ruth's voice shook with rage. "My husband, Cal, he—" Crane cut her off gently. "Cal was stubborn. He kept papers. He thought paper protects you." He leaned forward in the saddle. "Paper just makes you a target." Mara made a small sound, terrified. Ruth pulled her girls closer with her elbow, rifle still up. Jesse's mind raced. Two forces, ravine between, no path forward, no path back. Family in the middle with a dying boy. Crane lifted his chin toward Jesse. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to put down the gun. You're going to walk back to town with me." He smiled at Ruth like he was offering mercy. "And Ruth will keep breathing. Her girls will keep breathing. The boy—" His eyes flicked to Eli. "Well, that one's between God and whatever you pray to." Ruth's face twisted, tears spilling now despite her will. "Please." Crane raised a hand, almost kind. "Don't beg me, Ruth. Beg him. He's the one who brought Rourke to your door." Jesse's jaw clenched until it hurt. He looked at Ruth, then at the girls, then at Eli's pale face. Hattie, behind them, whispered through clenched teeth, "He's playing you." If you go with Crane, Rourke still comes later. If you don't, they kill you all now. Crane's smile stayed fixed. Choose, cowboy. Across the ravine, Rourke leaned slightly forward, watching, waiting, his patience back in place. Jesse felt something inside him go very quiet. Not surrender, not panic, calculation. He lowered his revolver slowly, letting Crane see it. Crane's smile deepened, satisfied. That's right. Jesse took one step forward. Then he raised his voice, loud enough for both men to hear. Rourke! Rourke's eyes narrowed. Jesse reached into his coat and pulled out the only thing he had left that mattered. Cal's torn cloth, stained with Eli's blood. He held it up like a flag. You want payment? Jesse called. Come get it yourself. Crane's smile faltered, just a twitch. He didn't like this. He didn't like anything he couldn't script. Rourke stared across the ravine, then said, cold. You think I'm crossing that death trap again? Jesse's eyes stayed locked on his. You told me you want witnesses. He lifted his chin toward Crane behind him. There's your witness. Crane's eyes sharpened, realizing the angle too late. Rourke's mouth curled, not in humor, but in decision. He lifted a hand to his men, then stepped back onto the trestle. And at the exact moment his boot hit the first board, Jesse turned, sprinted 3 steps into the timberline, grabbed Eli off the ground with both arms, and shoved the dying boy into Ruth's hands. Ruth gasped. What are you? Jesse didn't answer. He pivoted, grabbed Mara and her sister by their shoulders, and pushed them toward Hattie. North, he snapped. Run! Don't stop! Hattie's eyes widened. Cole! Jesse shoved Hattie's rifle into her hands harder. Shoot anyone who follows! Then Jesse turned back toward Crane, alone now, walking out of the tree line into open ground where both Crane and Rourke could see him clearly. Crane's smile returned, but now it had teeth. Ah, there you are. Jesse stopped a few yards from Crane's riders, hands open at his sides, revolver dropped behind him in the leaves. He looked straight at Crane and smiled back for the first time. You wanted me visible, Jesse said quietly. You got it. Crane's eyes narrowed. What are you doing? Jesse's gaze flicked past Crane's shoulder to the ravine. Rourke was already halfway onto the trestle again, moving faster now, anger pushing his caution. Crane glanced back, saw it, and his face tightened, because for the first time, Crane understood he'd put himself between 2 predators. Jesse's voice stayed calm. You reinforced the bridge, Jesse said. You thought that meant you controlled who crosses. Crane's smile strained. I do. Jesse took 1 step closer. No, he said. You just made sure the wrong man could reach you. Crane's eyes flashed, and he snapped at his men. Get him. But before anyone moved, a shot cracked from the timberline behind Jesse, Hattie's rifle, clean and sharp. One of Crane's riders pitched sideways off his saddle, dead before he hit the ground. Crane jerked, furious, swinging his head toward the trees. Jesse moved in the same instant, fast, brutal, closing the distance, grabbing Crane's reins, yanking the horse's head sideways to spin Crane out of line with his men. Crane shouted, startled, losing that composed posture for the first time. Jesse's other hand came up with a small, gleaming object he'd palmed from his pocket. Crane's own silver watch chain. Jesse looped it around Crane's neck in one violent motion and hauled him down off the saddle. Crane hit the ground hard, choking, eyes bulging. Jesse leaned close into Crane's ear, voice low and deadly. You told me debts move, Jesse hissed. So here's yours. Behind them, boots thundered on wood. Rourke was running now, not walking, crossing the trestle like a man who'd decided he didn't care if he fell. And Jesse, still holding Crane by the chain, dragged him toward the edge of the ravine as the bridge groaned under Rourke's weight. Crane's boots dug trenches in the dirt as Jesse hauled him backward, the watch chain biting into flesh. Crane clawed at it, choking, face purple, eyes wide with a kind of disbelief that didn't belong on him. You're crazy, Crane rasped, fighting for air. Jesse didn't answer. He kept dragging. The ravine edge was 10 steps away, maybe less. Wind rose from it, cold and hungry, carrying the sound of the trestle complaining under weight. Rourke was coming fast now. Boards thudded under his boots. The bridge swayed, iron groaning, old wood whining like it knew it was being asked to do one last wrong thing. Crane's men surged forward, shouting, rifles lifting. Hattie's rifle cracked from the timberline again. A rider toppled, another ducked instinctively. It bought a heartbeat. Jesse used it. He yanked Crane harder, spinning him so Crane's back hit the earth. Jesse planted a boot on Crane's chest and leaned down, chain tight, not to kill, just to control. Crane wheezed, spit bubbling at his lips. You don't understand who you're bringing." "I understand," Jesse said, voice flat. "You wanted him. You wanted me. Fine." He jerked Crane's head toward the ravine so Crane could see. Rourke reached the far end of the trestle and stepped onto their side like the ravine had never existed. His coat flared slightly in the wind. Blood still streaked his temple where Jesse's bullet had grazed him. It looked almost decorative on a man like that. He slowed to a walk again the moment his boots touched solid ground, because now he had what he wanted: witnesses. Rourke's men stayed back on the trestle, rifles up, watching the timberline where Hattie hid. They didn't advance. They didn't need to. The situation was already closing like a fist. Rourke's eyes locked on Jesse, then dropped to Crane pinned beneath Jesse's boot. A small smile appeared, thin as wire. "Virgil Crane," Crane tried to speak. It came out as a wet cough. Fear flickered across his face. Real fear now, not the kind he sold to others. Rourke took another step forward, slow, savoring. "I wondered when you'd stop hiding behind bank papers and start paying what you owe," Crane's voice scraped out. "I don't owe you," Rourke's smile vanished. "You do." He reached inside his coat and pulled out the folded paper again, the one he'd shown Jesse in the barn, and held it up for Crane to see. Crane's eyes widened. He knew it. He knew exactly what it was. Rourke's gaze slid back to Jesse. "You brought him," Rourke said softly, almost pleased. "Good." Jesse kept his boot planted. "You wanted me," he said. "You got me too." Rourke looked at Jesse like a man looks at a tool he hasn't decided to keep or break. "You still owe," he said. "But this," his eyes returned to Crane. "This is the root of it." Crane spat blood and tried to twist under Jesse's boot. Jesse shifted his weight, pinning him harder. The chain bit deeper. Crane's hands clawed uselessly at his own throat. Rourke's voice stayed calm. "Where are Calhoun's papers?" Crane's eyes darted. "What?" Rourke crouched slightly, close enough to make it personal without touching. "The papers your man took from the Bible, the ones that tie you to arson, murder, and the taking of children as collateral." His eyes hardened. "Where are they?" Crane's mouth opened and closed. He tried to smile. It came out like a grimace. "You think you can use that against me?" Rourke's laugh was quiet. "I don't need to use it. I need to own it." He leaned in. "Answer." Crane's gaze flicked toward Stillwater, toward the road back, toward the idea of distance. "In my office," he croaked. "Safe, second drawer." Jesse's grip on the chain tightened. "You did burn her kitchen," Jesse said, voice low. "You did send men for her kids." Crane choked out something between a cough and a laugh. "It's business." Rourke's face didn't change, but the air around him did. "Business," he repeated, tasting the word like poison. He stood up and looked over Jesse's shoulder toward the timberline. "Ruth Calhoun," he called, voice carrying. Ruth's answer came back from the trees, raw. "Stay away from my family." Rourke didn't move toward the trees. He didn't need to. He looked at Jesse again. "Bring her here." Jesse's jaw tightened. "No." Rourke's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then I bring her." He nodded once toward his men. Two of them lifted their rifles and aimed into the timberline. Hattie's rifle cracked. One of Rourke's men jerked and dropped to a knee, swearing, but the second man kept his aim steady, unfazed. Rourke's voice stayed soft. "You see? More bodies, more screaming, and the boy is already fading." He tilted his head. "How many children do you want to bury for a widow you met this morning?" Jesse's teeth clenched so hard his jaw ached. Ruth shouted again, closer now. She was moving, forced by the pressure. "Jesse, don't." Jesse didn't look back. He couldn't. He stared at Rourke. "You said give you what's yours and the family walks." Rourke's lips curved. "Yes." Jesse nodded once. "Then take him." He yanked Crane up by the chain and shoved him forward onto his knees, directly between Jesse and Rourke. Crane gagged, hands clutching his throat, eyes wild. Rourke stepped closer, stopping a few feet away. He looked down at Crane like Crane was a stain on the ground. Crane's voice came out hoarse. "Alden, listen, we can—" Rourke cut him off with a quiet, flat sentence. "You sold me a promise. Crane swallowed hard, terrified. You got your money. Rourke's eyes lifted to Jesse for half a heartbeat, then back to Crane. Money is not payment, he said. Crane's gaze snapped to Jesse, pleading now. Cole, Jesse's face stayed still. You told me debts don't disappear, Jesse said. They move. Crane's eyes filled with hate. You'll die too. Maybe, Jesse said. Rourke reached into his coat and pulled out a revolver, polished, clean, almost beautiful. He didn't aim it yet. He let Crane stare at it. Crane started shaking. Wait. Rourke's voice was almost gentle. Tell me where the papers are, and tell me who else has copies. Crane's lips trembled. No one. No copies. Just the originals. Rourke nodded once like he'd been expecting that. Then, Rourke lifted the revolver and pressed the muzzle to Crane's forehead. Crane sobbed, a broken sound. Please. And that was when Jesse saw it. Rourke wasn't going to kill Crane. Not yet. He was going to make Jesse watch, make Ruth hear, make the girls remember, make it a lesson that would last longer than any death. Jesse's voice snapped, sharp. Rourke! Rourke didn't look away from Crane. Yes? Jesse swallowed the bile rising in his throat. The promise, the one you say I signed. He forced the words out. What do you want from me? Rourke finally turned his head slightly, eyes sliding to Jesse. I want you to remember, he said, and I want you to pay with your own hands. Jesse's stomach dropped. No. Rourke's smile returned, thin. Yes. He nodded toward Crane. You'll do it. Or I start with the widow's girls. Ruth's scream ripped from the timberline. No! Hattie fired again, but the shot went wide, hitting bark. Rourke's men raised their rifles higher, aiming into the trees without hesitation now. Jesse's mind went cold and clear. He looked at Crane on his knees. He looked at Rourke holding the gun like a judge. He looked toward the trees where Ruth and the girls hid, where Eli lay dying. Then Jesse lifted his hands slowly, showing Rourke his palms. Fine, Jesse said, voice hollow. Give me the gun. Crane's eyes widened in desperate hope. Ruth's scream turned into a choked sob. Rourke's expression softened. Satisfaction. He stepped forward and extended the revolver toward Jesse, grip first. Jesse took it. The metal was cold, heavy, familiar. He raised it toward Crane. Crane stared up at him, shaking, eyes begging, mouth forming words that wouldn't come. Jesse's finger settled on the trigger. Rourke watched, breath held, like a man savoring a meal. Jesse's hand didn't shake. He turned the barrel away from Crane and fired at Rourke. The shot cracked across the ravine like a whip. Rourke's head snapped back, not from impact but from the shock of it. Because Jesse's bullet didn't hit his chest, it punched clean through Rourke's gun hand. Rourke screamed, real and furious, dropping his weapon into the dirt. Jesse lunged forward at the same instant, grabbing Crane by the collar and hauling him up as a shield, dragging him backward toward the timberline. And behind them, Rourke's men opened fire, bullets tearing into dust and wood, and Jesse felt Crane jerk in his arms as one of the rounds hit him, and Crane let out a choking gasp. Safe! Second drawer! Crane wheezed one last time, then went limp. Jesse shoved Crane's body away and ran, sprinting toward the trees as Ruth's daughters screamed, as Hattie fired and fired, as Rourke bellowed orders through pain, and Jesse hit the tree line, smoke and leaves exploding around him, only to see Ruth on her knees beside Eli, shaking his shoulders, her voice breaking into a sound Jesse had never heard from her before, because Eli wasn't breathing anymore. Ruth's hands kept moving on Eli's chest like she could push breath back into him by force. Her fingers were slick with blood and soot. Her mouth was open, but what came out wasn't a word. It was a broken sound that didn't belong in a person. Mama, Mara whispered, small and helpless. Ruth didn't look up. She pressed her forehead to Eli's and rocked once, hard like the motion might restart him. Then she jerked back and tried again, frantic, slapping his cheek, pleading into his face. Eli, no, baby, you stay. Jesse dropped to his knees beside them. He didn't touch Ruth at first. If he touched her now, she might shatter. Or he might. Hattie fired again from behind a trunk, the rifle's crack cutting through Ruth's sobbing. Leaves snapped and jumped as bullets tore into bark. Rourke's men were still shooting, slower now, more careful, trying to flank the timberline. Rourke was screaming somewhere out in the open, his voice raw with pain and rage. Bring him to me! Bring me Cole! Jesse's ears caught the sound of boots pushing through brush on the right, men moving wide, trying to fold the trees around them. He grabbed Ruth's shoulder, firm. "Ruth," he said. "Ruth, look at me." She didn't. He shook her once. "Ruth!" Her head snapped up. Her eyes were wild and empty at the same time. She stared through him, then at him, then down at Eli again, like her mind kept refusing the same truth. Jesse swallowed hard. "We have to move." Ruth's face twisted. "I know," Jesse said, and his voice cracked on the last word. Ruth's hands stayed on Eli, refusing. Mara was crying silently now, shoulders shaking. The younger girl clung to her sister, eyes huge, mouth tight, trying not to make a sound. Hattie shouted without looking over, "They're coming in! Cole, now!" A bullet struck the tree above them and showered them with splinters. Ruth flinched, instinct finally biting through grief. Jesse leaned in, low, his voice tight and urgent. "If we die here, he dies here too, and they take your girls. Do you understand me?" Ruth's breath hitched. She stared at her daughters. Something hard slid into place behind her eyes. She wiped her face with the back of her bleeding forearm and nodded once like a verdict. "Help me," she rasped. Jesse didn't hesitate. He grabbed the blanket and folded it around Eli, quick and clumsy. Ruth took Eli's small body into her arms with a sound that was almost an animal noise, then stood. Her knees wobbled, but she didn't fall. She held her son like a soldier carries a flag. Jesse grabbed Mara's shoulder. "You stay right behind your mother. Do not let go." Mara nodded, lips trembling. She grabbed her sister's hand tighter. Hattie fired twice more, then reloaded with shaking fingers. "Go left," she hissed, "toward the creek. I'll cover." Jesse glanced out through the brush. Rourke was visible now, backlit by open sky, one hand hanging bloody and ruined at his side, the other holding his own pistol with a death grip. His face was twisted with rage that didn't care about pain. He pointed with his good hand. "There!" Men surged toward the trees. Jesse shoved Ruth forward. "Move!" They ran, not straight, not fast enough to leave the girls behind, but fast enough that fear turned into momentum. Jesse stayed between them and the open. Hattie limped after, firing in measured bursts to keep heads down. They hit the creek bed again, feet splashing in cold water, and followed it south this time, back toward Stillwater instead of away, because north was now a net, and west was smoke and open land. Ruth looked at Jesse, shocked through tears. "We're going back?" Jesse didn't look at her. "Crane's office, the papers." Ruth's jaw clenched so hard it trembled. "My son." "I know," Jesse said. "But those papers are the only thing that can stop this from happening again. To your girls, to anyone." Ruth's eyes flicked down to Eli in her arms. Her throat worked like she was swallowing nails. She nodded once, savage. "Then we get them." Behind them, Rourke's men hit the creek bed and the dogs started again. New dogs now, not the ones Hattie killed. Their baying echoed off stone. Hattie spat. He had more. Jesse's mind snapped through options. No horses, no ammo to trade. One chance left. Make Stillwater choose a side. They ran the creek until it narrowed into a culvert under the old road, dark, low, stinking of mud. Jesse shoved them into it without hesitation. "In," he ordered. "Crawl." Ruth went first, dragging Eli through the muck, her dress soaking, her face set like stone. Mara and her sister followed, hands and knees sliding on slime. Hattie went last, grimacing, rifle held above the water. Jesse crawled at the mouth of the culvert, last, turning to watch. The first dog appeared at the creek bank, nose down, snarling, eyes bright. Behind it, boots and lantern light even in daylight, moving with purpose. Jesse grabbed a fist-sized rock and hurled it upstream, hard so it splashed loudly against the bank. The dog's head snapped toward the sound. It hesitated, confused. Men shouted, "Keep it on the scent!" Jesse kicked water and mud downstream, smearing their trail, then shoved himself into the culvert and pulled a broken plank across the entrance as best he could. They crawled through darkness until the culvert spat them out on the far side of the road, into a ditch choked with weeds. Stillwater lay ahead, half hidden by smoke from the burned ranch. The sun was sinking now, turning the town's windows into dull gold squares. People would be on porches. People would be watching. Ruth rose from the ditch with Eli in her arms. Her dress was ruined. Her hair was matted. Her face was a mask of grief held back by fury. Mara helped her sister up, both girls shaking. Hattie hauled herself up with a hiss of pain. We walk in like this, they'll smell blood and scatter. Jessie stared at Town. Or they'll finally see. Hattie barked a laugh. Town don't see. Town looks away. Jessie's eyes narrowed. Not if the right man is dead in the right place. Ruth's gaze snapped to him. Crane? Jessie nodded once. Crane's gone, but his office isn't. They moved along the edge of town, keeping to alleys and the backs of sheds. The first lamps were being lit. Voices drifted. Laughter. A piano somewhere, stubbornly playing as if the world wasn't on fire. Ruth's breathing came hard. Every few steps she looked down at Eli's face like she expected him to change. He didn't. At the corner of Crane's building, 2 stories, whitewashed, too clean for the frontier. Jessie stopped and listened. No guard out front, no lights in the windows. The street was busy enough that no one watched the back. Hattie crouched, wincing. You go in, you don't come out. Jessie glanced at her. You keep them hidden. If anything moves wrong, you take Ruth and the girls and you run. North Timber, railroad cut, don't stop. Ruth's eyes burned. I'm not leaving you. Jessie's voice went low. Ruth, you're leaving me. You already lost 1 child today. Don't lose the others because you're angry at the wrong time. Ruth's jaw trembled. She looked down at Eli, then at Mara, then at the younger girl. Her shoulders sagged for half a heartbeat. Get the papers, she whispered. Bring them to me. Jessie nodded once. I will. He slipped around back and found the office's rear door. Simple lock, cheap. Crane trusted fear more than iron. Jessie pulled his knife and worked the lock until it clicked. He eased the door open. Inside, the air smelled like ink and money and the faint sweetness of cigar smoke. It was quiet in the way quiet feels wrong. He moved through the dark office by memory of daylight earlier. Desk, filing cabinets, shelves. He found the desk. He found the second drawer. It was locked. Of course it was. He slid the knife into the seam and pried. Wood creaked. The lock popped. He pulled the drawer open. A small safe sat inside. Iron box with a dial. Not big. Big enough for papers. Big enough for a man like Crane to think he'd won. Jessie's hands tightened. He didn't have time for dials. He didn't have patience for guessing. He lifted the safe, testing weight, then set it down hard on the floor and reached for the fireplace poker by the wall, ornamental, more for show than use. He jammed it into the safe's hinge seam and leaned his whole weight. Metal groaned. The hinge bent. He heard a faint sound behind him. Floorboard, barely. Jessie froze. The room wasn't empty. He turned slowly. A figure stood in the doorway to Crane's inner office, backlit by the street lamp glow through blinds. Black coat, hat brim low, Rourke. His wounded hand was wrapped in cloth, already soaked through. His good hand held a pistol steady, aimed at Jessie's chest like it belonged there. Rourke's voice was quiet, almost conversational. Second drawer, he said. You went right to it. Jessie didn't move. His heart didn't race. It went cold. Rourke stepped forward 1 slow pace. You think you're the only one who knows where Crane hid things? Jessie's jaw tightened. How did you? Rourke's smile was thin. I walked into town behind you. While you crawled through mud, I rode the road. His eyes flicked to the safe on the floor. Now open it. Jessie's grip tightened on the poker. If I do, you kill Ruth and her girls. Rourke's smile didn't change. No. He tilted his head. I kill you. Then I decide what to do with the rest based on my mood. Jessie stared at him. You said witnesses. Rourke's eyes hardened. Witnesses are optional now. A voice came from behind Rourke, soft, almost amused. Careful, Alden. A second figure stepped into the doorway behind him, and Jessie's stomach dropped again because the voice was smooth, familiar. Virgil Crane. Alive. Pale, but alive, with a fresh bandage high under his collar and a smile that looked stapled on. He should have been dead. He should have been lying in the dirt by the ravine. Crane adjusted his watch chain, new chain, not the one Jessie used, and his eyes gleamed. Close, Crane said softly, but you dragged the wrong body. Crane stepped fully into the light, and Jessie's mind refused it for a breath. His collar was torn and bandaged where the chain had bitten. His face was chalk pale, but his eyes were bright with the kind of joy that only comes from surviving something you deserved. Rourke didn't look at Crane like an ally. He looked at him like an interruption. You should be dead, Jesse said, voice flat. Crane's smile widened. And you should be smarter. But we don't always get what we should, do we? He nodded at the floor. You left your gun in the leaves. I admire commitment to your performance. Jesse's grip tightened on the poker. He could feel the iron bite into his palm. Rourke's pistol never moved off Jesse's chest. Enough, Rourke said. Open the safe. Crane's head turned slightly toward Rourke, amused. Careful, Alden. That safe's not yours. Rourke's wounded hand twitched at his side. Everything in this town becomes mine when I decide it does. Crane chuckled softly. That's why you're always in debt to your own appetite. Rourke's eyes narrowed. You brought me here to collect coal. You don't get to lecture me about appetite. Crane lifted his bandaged neck slightly, as if savoring how close death had been. I brought you here because you wanted a spectacle. His gaze slid to Jesse. And because I wanted him to think he could win. Jesse's jaw clenched. Where's Ruth? Crane's smile didn't change. Outside, not far, trying to be brave, carrying that boy like a saint in a sermon. He tilted his head. It suits her. Tragic women always sell well. Jesse felt heat rise behind his eyes, sharp and dangerous. He kept his voice steady. If you touch them, Crane interrupted, gentle. You already touched them. You lit the match, Jesse. You just didn't know which fuse it was attached to. Rourke's patience snapped. Open the safe. Jesse looked at Rourke, then at Crane. 2 men, 2 hungers, 1 room. They didn't trust each other. That was the only crack. Jesse set the poker down slowly, deliberate. He raised his hands away from it, showing obedience. Rourke's pistol tracked him. Good. Jesse crouched by the safe, fingers on the bent hinge. He could pry it open with brute force in seconds, but that wasn't the move. He glanced up at Crane. You said second drawer. You said originals only. Crane's eyes glittered. I'm a man of tradition. Jesse nodded like he accepted that. Then he leaned in toward the safe and spoke softly, as if confessing to the metal. You ever wonder why Cal kept them in a Bible? Jesse asked. Crane's smile faltered a fraction. He was sentimental. No, Jesse said. He was scared. Rourke's voice turned sharp. Stop talking. Jesse kept working the hinge, but his eyes stayed on Crane. Cal knew you'd take them, Jesse said, so he did what scared men do. He made a copy. Crane's face tightened. There were no copies. Jesse lifted his eyebrows. You sure? Because the only reason you'd hide papers in a safe like this is because you're afraid of what they say. He gave a small, hard smile. And afraid men always miss something. Crane's jaw worked. He took one slow step forward. Rourke noticed, pistol flicking briefly toward Crane, then back to Jesse. Don't. Crane held up his hands, innocent. I'm just curious. Jesse's fingers slipped into the safe seam again. He forced the hinge wider. Metal groaned. He made sure it was loud enough to pull both men's attention to the box, then he stopped. He looked up at Rourke. If I open it, you read what's inside. Rourke's eyes narrowed. Yes. Jesse's voice stayed level. And if it proves Crane's been lying to you, what happens? Crane's smile turned brittle. It won't. Rourke's gaze flicked to Crane, cold. If it proves he lied, he dies. Crane's smile twitched. Jesse let a beat hang. Then he shoved the hinge hard. The safe popped open with a metallic snap. Inside were papers, neatly stacked, tied with twine. A thin leather notebook, a sealed envelope with wax, and on top, a small photograph, old and creased. Jesse's eyes locked on it before he could stop them. A canyon. A group of men. A younger Jesse, leaner, meaner, standing with a gun and a grin that didn't belong on him anymore. And beside him, a boy on his knees, hands bound, face turned toward the camera. Not dead. Not yet. Jesse's breath caught. The room tilted. Rourke's face changed as he saw it too. Not surprise. Recognition that had been waiting years to be fed. Crane leaned in, eyes bright, enjoying the moment like he'd rehearsed it. That's your debt, Crane whispered, in ink and light. Jesse's throat went dry. Who took that picture? Crane's smile widened. Cal did. Ruth's husband. Jesse's head snapped up. No. Crane nodded, satisfied. Cal was there, Jesse. Not as a hero, as a boy, as a witness, as the one you didn't notice because you were too busy being a legend. Rourke's good hand tightened on his pistol. Calhoun, he said slowly. That's why the name felt familiar. Crane spread his hands. The frontier's a small place if you live long enough. Jesse's mind raced, trying to stitch it together. Cal seeing something years ago, carrying it like a stone, hiding it in his Bible, trying to bring it to the county, getting killed for it. Ruth left with children and a debt designed to choke her. Rourke's voice went low, dangerous. You kept this. Crane's eyes glittered. Of course, it's leverage. Rourke's wounded hand trembled from pain, but his fury was clean. You used my brother to bait Cole into town. You used that widow to bait him into the open. You used me to finish what you started. Crane's smile sharpened. And it worked. Jesse's gaze flicked to the envelope with wax. He could see Cal's handwriting on it, rough, urgent, to the sheriff. Jesse's stomach dropped. There's a letter. Crane's eyes flicked to it too, and for the first time he looked uneasy. Just a sliver. Rourke saw it. His pistol dipped toward the safe. Give it. Crane's voice snapped tight. That letter isn't yours. Rourke's eyes flashed. Everything here is mine. Crane's smile returned, forced. Then take it from me. The air in the office tightened until it felt like a rope around Jesse's chest. 2 predators, 1 prize, and Jesse between them. He moved without thinking. He grabbed the sealed letter, not the photograph, not the notebook, just the letter, and shoved it inside his coat. Crane's eyes widened. Don't! Rourke's pistol snapped up. Cole! Jesse backed away 1 step, hands raised again, showing he wasn't reaching for a gun. You both want it, he said, voice steady. So you both can't have it. Crane's smile vanished completely. You idiot. That letter is your death. Jesse nodded once. Maybe. Rourke took 1 step forward, gun unwavering. Give it to me. Jesse shook his head. No, you'll bury it like he did. Rourke's jaw tightened. I will use it. Jesse's voice hardened. You'll use it for yourself. Crane laughed, sharp. Listen to him, Alden. He thinks truth belongs to the people. Rourke's eyes stayed on Jesse. You are not leaving this room. Jesse's gaze flicked to the window, the alley. Ruth out there somewhere with 2 girls and a dead boy in her arms. Hattie bleeding. The town still pretending. Jesse made a decision so fast it didn't feel like a decision at all. He whipped the letter from his coat and hurled it straight into the fireplace. Crane screamed, real panic breaking through. No! Rourke lunged, furious, but Jesse moved first, kicking the poker up with his boot and catching it in both hands. He swung it across the hearth, pinning Rourke back from the flames just long enough. Crane dove toward the fireplace with bare hands, trying to snatch the envelope before it caught. The wax seal blackened, paper curled. Crane clawed at it, but the heat bit him. He yelped, jerked back, and the envelope slipped deeper into the coals. Rourke roared, "Move!" He shoved forward, pistol coming around the poker. Jesse swung again, not at Rourke's head, but at his wounded hand. Iron hit bone. Rourke screamed, gun clattering to the floor. In the same moment, Crane shoved Jesse with both hands, desperate, trying to reach the fire again. Jesse stumbled, then drove his shoulder into Crane's chest, slamming him into the desk hard enough to rattle ink bottles. Crane gasped, pain flashing. You don't know what you're doing. Jesse grabbed Crane by the vest. I know exactly, he hissed. You don't get to own her husband's last words. Crane's eyes went wild. Then none of you get them. Behind Jesse, Rourke snatched his fallen gun with his good hand and raised it. Jesse saw the movement in the corner of his eye and shoved Crane down, diving sideways. The shot exploded. Glass shattered. The bullet punched through the window and into the alley outside. A scream followed. High, female, Ruth. Jesse's blood turned to ice. He bolted for the door, yanking it open into the alley, and saw Ruth stumbling backward, the letter's ashes drifting out the broken window like black snow, Mara and her sister clinging to her skirt, and Hattie on one knee with her rifle up. And Ruth's hands were empty now because Eli's small body lay on the cobblestones at her feet, and a dark stain was spreading across Ruth's shoulder where the bullet had hit her. Jesse hit the alley like a bullet, boots skidding on gravel and ash. The air stank of smoke and iron and hot ink. Ruth's knees buckled. Mara caught her at the waist, too small to hold her, but trying anyway, face twisted with terror. "Ma!" Mara choked. Ruth's lips parted. No sound came out at first, then a breath, wet and thin. Her hand rose toward the dark bloom on her shoulder like she couldn't believe it belonged to her body. Jesse dropped beside Eli's small form on the cobblestones, fingers already searching, already refusing what he knew. The boy's skin was cooling. His eyes were half open, glassy, looking at nothing. Jesse's throat tightened until it hurt to swallow. Hattie Boone was braced on one knee a few yards away, rifle aimed at the office door, face gray with pain and rage. "Don't you come out," she snarled under her breath, talking to the door like it was a man. From inside, footsteps hit the floorboards, fast, heavy. Rourke's voice snapped, muffled but close. "He's right there." Crane's laughter followed, sharp and ugly. "End it in the street. Let them all see." Jessie looked up at Ruth. Her eyes found his. There was grief in them, but something else too, pure hatred, focused, awake. "Don't let them," Ruth whispered. Jessie leaned in close. "Stay with me." Ruth's mouth trembled. "My girls." Jessie nodded once. "They're moving, I swear." He turned his head without taking his eyes off Ruth and barked, low and hard. "Mara, take your sister. Run to the church. Stay inside. Don't stop for anyone." Mara's face crumpled. "Mama." Ruth sucked in a painful breath and forced her voice out, ragged but firm. "Go." That one word cut through the girls like a whip. Mara grabbed her little sister's hand, yanked her up, and both of them stumbled into motion down the alley, sobbing, looking back once, then forcing themselves forward. Jesse watched them until they vanished around the corner. Then he shifted fully over Ruth, using his body as cover, and ripped a strip from his own shirt with both hands. He pressed it hard against Ruth's wound. Ruth hissed, jaw clenched. "Hurts." "Good," Jesse said. "Means you're still here." A door slammed open behind them. Hattie fired instantly. The shot cracked through the alley. A man shouted and stumbled back into the office doorway. Hattie worked the lever again, face twisted with pain. Crane stepped into the doorway next, using the doorframe like a stage. He didn't have a gun raised yet. He didn't need it. He smiled down the alley like he was watching a show he'd paid for. Behind him, Rourke appeared, pale eyes burning, gun up in his good hand, the other hanging useless at his side, wrapped and bloody. Rourke's gaze snapped to Ruth first, then to Eli on the stones, then to Jesse shielding Ruth. For a second, his face tightened, not pity, calculation. Crane called out, voice smooth, "Ruth, darling, you should have stayed quiet." Ruth's eyes blazed. "You killed Cal." Crane sighed like she was being inconvenient. "Cal killed Cal. He wanted to be important." Rourke took one step into the alley, gun steady. "Cole," he said, voice low, "you just burned the only thing that could have ended this clean." Jesse stared back. There was never a clean. Rourke's eyes flicked to Ruth. "Move away from her." Jesse didn't. Crane smiled wider, amused at the standoff. "Alden, be careful. He'll do something dramatic again. He likes that." Rourke ignored Crane, still watching Jesse. "Last chance." Hattie's rifle clicked, empty. She cursed, hands shaking as she tried to reload. Jesse's mind ran the alley like a map. Left, dead end behind the office. Right, Main Street, people, light, witnesses. Above, the office window, shattered, smoke drifting. Inside, desk, safe, papers still open, the notebook, the photograph. If the letter was gone, the proof might still live in those pages. Jesse looked at Ruth. "Can you stand?" Ruth tried. Her legs trembled. She got one foot under her. "Yes." Jesse tightened the cloth on her shoulder. "You're going to walk." Ruth's eyes narrowed. "Where?" Jesse's gaze lifted past her to the mouth of the alley where the main street lay. "Out there." Crane's smile faltered a fraction. He saw it too. "You won't," Crane said sharply. "You won't drag this into the open?" Jesse stood slowly, keeping himself between Ruth and the guns, one hand up, the other still pressing the cloth to Ruth's shoulder. Rourke's pistol tracked him. "Stop." Jesse didn't stop. He took one step, then another, guiding Ruth with him, moving toward the main street. Crane's voice hardened. "Alden!" Rourke's jaw tightened. He raised the pistol a hair higher, aiming for Jesse's center. Hattie finally jammed around into the chamber, hands clumsy, pain making her slow. Jesse's voice rose, not shouting yet, but loud enough to carry. "Crane!" The name snapped out into the alley and hit the air like a thrown rock. A couple of heads turned at the far end, townsfolk on porches, drawn by smoke and gunfire already, now hearing a voice they recognized. Crane's eyes flashed with fury. "Don't!" Jesse kept walking. "You told this town you were a banker," he called, voice louder now. "You told them you were a respectable man." Crane lifted his gun at last, the smile gone. "Shut your mouth." Rourke's finger tightened. Ruth stumbled and Jesse caught her, forcing her upright, pushing them forward together like a single stubborn thing. Jesse reached the mouth of the alley. The main street opened up, lamps, the saloon glow, people frozen mid-step, watching smoke from the west and now the figures emerging. A wounded widow, a dead child on the stones behind, a cowboy with blood on his hands, and two men in an office doorway that didn't belong on a ledger. Someone gasped. Someone whispered Ruth's name. Jesse didn't stop. He turned just enough so his voice would carry down the street, into windows, onto porches, into the saloon where men drank and pretended nothing happened. "Crane's men burned the Calhoun ranch," Jesse shouted. "They took papers from her home. They came for her children." Crane's face twisted. "Alden, shoot him!" Rourke's eyes flicked to the street full of witnesses, and for the first time his calculation shifted. Killing Jesse in the shadows was one thing. Killing him in front of a town that might finally decide to remember was another. But Rourke's rage was bigger than caution. He fired. The shot cracked, loud in the open street. Jesse felt the impact like a hammer in his side. Heat, then numbness. His legs threatened to fold. He caught himself, teeth clenched so hard his jaw shook. Ruth screamed and grabbed him, her bloody hand smearing across his coat. "Jesse!" Jesse forced his lungs to work and lifted his voice even higher, using pain as fuel. "Crane hid proof in his office," Jesse shouted. "Second drawer, safe, notebook, photograph." Crane surged forward out of the alley, gun raised, eyes wild now. "He's lying! He's a thief!" Hattie fired from the alley mouth. Her shot caught Crane's horse's flank as Crane tried to mount one of the rider's spare mounts. The animal screamed and reared, throwing Crane sideways into the dirt. The street erupted, people shouting, scrambling, some ducking behind barrels, some stepping forward despite fear because they'd been waiting their whole lives for someone else to start. Rourke stepped into the street, pistol up again, furious. "Move!" But the crowd had become an obstacle, bodies everywhere, panic and curiosity mixed, witnesses. Jesse, swaying, grabbed Ruth by the wrist and dragged her toward the sheriff's office across the street, small building with a star on the door and a lamp in the window. Ruth's boots dragged. She was fading. "I can't." "Yes," Jesse rasped. "You can." They hit the sheriff's steps. Jesse slammed his shoulder into the door. "Sheriff," he bellowed, "open!" The door cracked open, and Sheriff Tate, middle-aged, mustache, eyes wide, stared out like he was looking at a nightmare. "Ruth?" Tate breathed. Jesse shoved the door wider with his body. "Crane's office," Jesse said, gasping. "Safe's open. Proof's inside. Get it before they burn it." Tate's gaze snapped to the street where Crane was scrambling up out of the dirt, screaming at men, and Rourke was pushing through townsfolk with a gun in his hand. Tate's face went pale. "What in God's—" "Now," Jesse snarled. For a heartbeat, Tate hesitated. Fear of Crane, fear of Rourke, fear of choosing. Then he saw Eli's small body being dragged into view by someone sobbing, one of the town women who'd run forward. The sight hit the street like a curse. Tate's eyes hardened. He yanked the door open fully. "Get her inside." Jesse pushed Ruth in, half carrying her, then staggered after her, blood soaking through his shirt at the ribs. Outside, the crowd's noise swelled, angry now, not just scared. Tate grabbed his shotgun from the rack and shouted to his deputy, "To Crane's office! Fast!" Jesse sank to the floor beside Ruth, the room spinning. Ruth clutched his sleeve, eyes glassy, voice a whisper. "My girls." Jesse forced the words out through pain. "Church, there." The world tilted, his vision tunneled. And through the open doorway, Jesse saw Rourke stop at the edge of the crowd. Pale eyes locked on him, and Rourke lifted his gun one last time. Aiming past the sheriff's star, straight through the doorway, straight for Jesse's head. The shot didn't come. Not because Rourke changed his mind, because Sheriff Tate moved like a man finally ashamed of how long he'd waited. Tate stepped into the doorway with the shotgun raised and fired once, point blank into the street. The blast tore a crater out of the dirt in front of Rourke's boots and sent splinters flying off a hitching post. The sound hit the crowd like a slap. People screamed and scattered, but they didn't run far. They stayed close enough to see what happened next. Rourke froze. His pistol stayed up, but his eyes shifted, measuring Tate, measuring the law, measuring the crowd that had become a wall. Tate's voice boomed, thick with anger. "Drop it!" Rourke didn't drop it. He smiled, slow and cold, like Tate was a child playing sheriff. Then he lifted his gun again, aiming through the doorway. Jesse tried to stand. His legs didn't obey. The room swayed. His side burned, then went numb in waves. Ruth lay half on her side near the desk, blood soaking into the floorboards, eyes open but fading. She watched Rourke through the doorway like she wanted to burn his face into her memory for her girls. Deputy Miller, young, shaking, appeared behind Tate with a revolver raised, hands unsure. "Sheriff, shut up and aim," Tate snapped. Outside, a woman screamed, "That's Ruth Calhoun." Another voice yelled, "He killed her boy." The crowd pressed in again, not close enough to be shot, close enough to witness. Rourke's men pushed through the street, trying to line up shots. Tate swung the shotgun slightly, tracking them. "Any of you step closer, I start burying you." Crane was on his feet now near the alley mouth, dust on his vest, eyes frantic. He shouted over the chaos, "Sheriff, you don't know what you're doing. That man is—" Tate's head snapped toward Crane. "I know exactly what I'm doing." Crane's mouth opened, shocked. Tate's voice rose, carrying down the street. "Virgil Crane, you are under arrest for arson, theft, and the attempted kidnapping of minors." He tilted the shotgun toward him. "Put your hands where I can see them." Crane laughed, sharp and disbelieving. "You can't—" Hattie Boone limped into view from the alley, rifle shouldered, face gray, eyes murderous. "He can," she rasped, "and if he don't, I will." Crane's gaze flicked to Hattie and tightened. "You old—" Hattie fired, not at Crane's head, at his knee. Crane screamed and folded into the dirt, clutching his leg as the street exploded with gasps. His polished composure shattered into animal panic. Tate didn't even flinch. He kept his shotgun on the line between Rourke and the sheriff's door. Rourke's smile thinned, irritation sharpening into rage. "This town doesn't get to tell me what to do." Tate's eyes didn't blink. "In my town, you don't point a gun at wounded women in my doorway." Rourke's gaze slid to Jesse on the floor. "He belongs to me." Tate's jaw clenched. "He belongs to a grave if you keep this up." Rourke shifted his stance, looking past Tate, gauging whether he could put a bullet through Tate before Tate fired again. The crowd was too close now. Even Rourke couldn't guarantee a clean line. And then Tate's deputy spoke, voice shaking but loud. "Sheriff, papers, we got 'em." Two men came running down the street from Crane's office, Tate's deputies, faces pale, arms full of documents. One carried the small iron safe. The other held a leather notebook and a photograph pinched between two fingers like it was poison. "Found the safe open," the deputy panted. "Notebook inside, letters gone, burned in the hearth, but there's enough here." Crane on the ground hissed through clenched teeth. "Lies." The deputy held up the photograph. Jesse saw it from the floor, his own younger face, the canyon, the bound boy. The crowd saw it too as the deputy turned it outward without meaning to. Murmurs turned into a low roar, a sound like a dam starting to crack. Tate's eyes flicked to the photograph, his face hardened into something final. He aimed the shotgun down the street at Rourke and shouted, "Alden Rourke, you are trespassing armed and threatening civilians. Drop the weapon right now." Rourke's smile returned, but it was strained now. "You think a badge can stop me?" Tate answered without raising his voice. "No, but 12 angry men with ropes can." That line landed in the street like a match. People shifted. Men who'd been hiding behind barrels stepped out. One of them was the blacksmith. Another was the grocer's brother. Another was a ranch hand with soot on his sleeves from trying to help at the Calhoun place earlier. Rourke saw it. He saw how quickly a town could become a mob when the victim had a name and a child's body was still warm. His eyes narrowed. He lowered his gun, not all the way, just enough to look like restraint. Then he spoke softly, so only those near could hear, but the street went quiet anyway. "This doesn't end here." He backed away one step, then another, keeping his good hand steady. His men started pulling back too, slow, disciplined. They didn't run. They didn't have to. They weren't afraid of Stillwater. They were just deciding it wasn't worth dying in it tonight. Rourke's gaze locked on Jesse one last time, pale and empty. "You will remember," he said. Then he turned and walked away into the thinning smoke, his men peeling off with him, disappearing down the road like they'd never been there. Only when the last of them vanished did Tate exhale. "Deputy," Tate barked, "get Crane in irons." Crane thrashed on the ground, screaming, "You can't do this! You'll all die for this!" Hattie leaned down and smashed the butt of her rifle into Crane's jaw. Crane's scream cut off mid-sound. Silence fell in a hard, ugly wave. Inside the sheriff's office, Ruth's breathing turned thin and ragged. Jesse crawled to her, dragging his wounded side across the floor. He pressed his hand to her shoulder wound again, trying to stop what was already leaving. Ruth's eyes searched his face. "Mara," Jesse swallowed, forcing air into his lungs. "At the church, safe." Ruth's eyelids fluttered, her mouth trembled. "Eli." Jesse's throat tightened. He couldn't lie. He nodded once, small. A tear slid out of Ruth's eye and disappeared into her hair. She stared up at the ceiling like she was looking for a place to put the pain where it wouldn't crush her girls. Then her gaze snapped back to Jesse, fierce even now. "The papers," she whispered. "Do we have them?" Jesse looked to the deputies holding the notebook in the safe in the doorway. He nodded once. "We have them." Ruth's lips parted, and a breath escaped that sounded almost like relief and almost like a curse. "Good," she whispered. "Make it mean something." Jesse's vision swam. His side was soaked, his hands were slick. Tate stepped inside, face still hard, but his eyes flicked to Ruth and softened for the first time. "Doc's coming," he said, voice low. "Stay with us." Ruth's gaze didn't go to Tate, it stayed on Jesse. "Promise me," she said. Jesse leaned closer. "What?" Ruth's voice was barely sound. "My girls. Don't let them be taken." Jesse's jaw clenched until it shook. "I promise." Ruth held his stare for a long second. Then her grip loosened on his sleeve, fingers sliding away like they'd run out of strength. Her eyes stayed open. Then they didn't focus anymore. Tate swore under his breath and moved toward her, but Jesse already knew. He sat there, still, holding pressure on a wound that no longer mattered, while outside the sheriff's office, the town of Stillwater finally started to understand what it had allowed. And far down the road, beyond the last lamp, Alden Rourke's silhouette vanished into the dark with a broken hand and a promise that hadn't been paid. Jesse didn't cry. He'd thought once that a man either cried or he didn't, like it was a line in the dirt you chose to stand on. But sitting on the sheriff's floor, with Ruth Calhoun's eyes open and empty, he understood it wasn't a choice. It was a thing that happened or didn't, like rain. Outside, Stillwater sounded different now, not loud, not brave, confused, ashamed. The kind of quiet that comes after people realize they've been living inside someone else's fear. Sheriff Tate crouched beside Ruth, 2 fingers at her neck, then pulled his hand back slowly. His jaw worked as if he had to chew on the truth before he could swallow it. "Jesus," Tate murmured. Hattie Boone stood in the doorway, swaying, one hand on the frame. She looked like she was made of splinters and will. "Don't you go soft now, Tate," she rasped. "Not after the cost." Tate's deputy hovered with the safe and notebook, eyes wide, face pale. The photograph was in his other hand, pinched like it might burn him. "We need to get these somewhere secure," the deputy said. Tate's eyes cut toward the window where the town watched. "Secure doesn't exist," he said, "not tonight." Jesse finally moved. He pushed himself up on one elbow, then sat, pain flaring in his side like a hot nail. Blood had dried in stiff patches across his shirt. Every breath scraped. "Give me the notebook," Jesse said. The deputy hesitated. Tate looked at Jesse like he was deciding whether Jesse was a witness or a suspect. Hattie answered for him. "Give it," she snapped. The deputy stepped closer and handed it over. The leather cover was worn, edges frayed like Cal had carried it through years of dirt and decisions. Jesse opened it with careful hands. Inside were names, dates, amounts, ranches, fires, accidents, margins full of short notes, proof written by a man who knew if he wrote too much he'd be killed, and if he wrote too little, no one would believe him. Jesse flipped until he found Stillwater. There it was, Virgil Crane, payments, not to the bank, to Alden Rourke. And below that, small, tight handwriting, underlined twice. Coal brought back equals Rourke paid. Widow used as bait. Jesse's stomach tightened. It wasn't just a trap. It was a transaction. Tate leaned over Jesse's shoulder, eyes scanning. His face changed with every line, anger rising like heat. "This is enough," Tate said, voice turning rough. "This is more than enough." Hattie's laugh was thin. "Enough to hang Crane twice." Tate nodded once, then turned to the deputy. "Get a rider to Carson City at first light, and another to Cheyenne. Federal marshal, territorial judge, anyone who can move faster than Rourke." The deputy swallowed. What if Rourke comes back before morning? Tate's gaze slid to the street. Men were still out there, watching, whispering. A few had brought rifles without being asked, not because they were brave, because they were scared of being ashamed again. "If he comes back," Tate said, "he meets a town that finally picked a side." Jesse closed the notebook. His hands shook slightly now, not from fear, blood loss. "Where are the girls?" he asked. Tate blinked. "Church. The pastor's wife took them in." Jesse nodded once. He looked down at Ruth again. She lay as if she'd simply stopped mid-sentence. The cloth Jesse had pressed to her shoulder was soaked through. Hattie followed his gaze. Her eyes softened for a heartbeat. "She died standing," Hattie said. "That counts for something." Jesse's voice was low. "Not enough." A commotion outside snapped attention to the street. Two deputies dragged Virgil Crane toward the office steps, wrists in irons, one leg dragging useless behind him. His jaw hung slightly crooked from Hattie's rifle butt. He spat blood onto the boards and tried to smile anyway. "You think paper wins," Crane rasped, voice slurred. "Paper burns." Tate stepped out onto the porch, shotgun in hand, and shoved Crane down onto the dirt in full view of the town. "This town's going to see you," Tate said, loud enough for every porch to hear. "And then the territory will." Crane's eyes found Jesse in the doorway, and his smile sharpened into hatred. "You're dead either way, Cole," he hissed. "Rourke doesn't forget. He doesn't forgive. He collects." Jesse held Crane's gaze without moving. "Then he'll have to come collect in daylight." Crane laughed and coughed at the same time. "Daylight won't save you." Jesse didn't answer. He turned away from Crane and walked, slow, limping, out of the sheriff's office. The street parted without anyone meaning to. People watched him like they were seeing a stranger and a ghost at the same time. He headed straight for the church. Inside, candles burned low. The air smelled of wax and pine and quiet fear. The pastor's wife stood near the front, hands clasped tight, eyes red. "They're in the back," she whispered. Jesse moved down the aisle, boots soft on wood, and found Mara and her sister curled together on a pew. Both looked up when he approached. Mara's face tightened, like she already knew what his eyes were going to say. "Where's Mama?" the younger girl whispered. Jesse's throat tightened. He didn't kneel. He didn't dress it up. "She was brave," he said, "and she loved you more than anything." He swallowed hard. "She's gone." The younger girl made a small sound and buried her face in Mara's shoulder. Mara didn't cry at first. Her jaw clenched and trembled as if she was holding her whole world together with teeth. Then she looked straight at Jesse, eyes wet but steady. "You promised," she said, voice thin. "You promised she wouldn't let us be taken." Jesse nodded once, slow. "I promised you." Mara's lips parted. "Then what do we do?" Jesse looked at the candlelight, at the wooden walls, at the town outside that had finally decided to stop pretending. He felt the notebook's weight in his coat like a new kind of burden. "We bury your brother," he said. "We bury your mama." He held Mara's gaze. "And then we make sure the men who did this can't hide behind money or paper ever again." Mara stared at him for a long second. Then she nodded once, the way her mother had earlier, like a verdict. Outside the church, a horse whinnied, restless. Jesse turned his head toward the sound, instincts sharpening again. Across the street, in the gap between buildings where the lamplight didn't quite reach, a silhouette stood for a heartbeat, tall, still, hat brim low. A man watching, not Rourke, someone else. The figure lifted 2 fingers to the brim in a slow, almost polite gesture, then vanished into the dark before Jesse could move. Jesse's blood went cold for a different reason. Because he recognized that gesture. He'd seen it years ago in a canyon, right before everything went wrong. And it meant only one thing. Rourke hadn't been the only one waiting. Jesse didn't sleep. He sat on the church steps with his back against the post, watching Stillwater pretend it was normal. Lamps burned, doors stayed shut. Men spoke in whispers like loud words might bring Rourke back. Inside, the pastor's wife had finally coaxed Mara and her sister to lie down on the pew cushions. They weren't sleeping either. Mara watched the door every time it creaked. The little one clutched her sleeve like she might disappear if she let go. Hattie Boone sat across the street on a barrel outside the sheriff's office, rifle across her lap, face drawn tight. She looked like the kind of woman who would bleed to death before she allowed herself to lie down. Sheriff Tate moved in and out of his office, barking orders in a voice that was too loud, like he was trying to convince himself the badge meant something. 2 deputies stood on the porch with shotguns now, not for show, for fear. Jesse felt the notebook in his coat like a stone, Cal's handwriting, Cal's list, Cal's last attempt to force truth into daylight. The letter was ash, but the ledger was alive. Crane was in a cell, moaning and cursing. Tate had him chained to the wall like an animal. And still, Jesse couldn't shake the image of that silhouette in the gap between buildings, tall, still, the same slow 2-finger touch to the brim. He'd seen it in a canyon years ago, right before the Silverton job turned into a slaughter. Back then he'd been younger and stupid enough to think the world was divided into men you fought and men you rode with. He knew better now. Footsteps approached along the boardwalk, slow, measured, not sneaking, not hurrying. Jesse didn't turn his head. He kept his eyes on the street and spoke anyway. "If you're here to pray," he said, "pick another porch." Sheriff Tate stopped beside him, breath visible in the lamplight. He held the leather notebook in both hands like he was afraid to drop it. "We got enough to hang Crane," Tate said quietly. "Maybe enough to pull the bank down with him." Jesse's voice stayed flat. "And Rourke?" Tate swallowed. "Rourke rode out. My writer says his men took the South Road. They didn't look back." Jesse nodded once. "He'll be back." Tate's jaw tightened. "Then we'll be ready." Jesse finally looked at Tate, and his gaze wasn't kind. "You'll be ready for what you understand. You don't understand him." Tate's face twitched. "Then tell me." Jesse stared into the street again. "Rourke doesn't fight for land. He fights for ownership, of fear, of men, of stories. And tonight, he didn't lose. He just postponed." Tate's grip tightened on the notebook. "What do we do with this?" Jesse's eyes narrowed. "You make copies. Tonight." Tate blinked. "Tonight?" Jesse's voice hardened. "Right now, before something burns, before someone disappears. Cal learned that too late." Tate hesitated, then nodded once and hurried back toward his office. Jesse stayed on the steps, listening. A horse shifted somewhere nearby. Harness leather creaked. A low murmur of male voices drifted from the direction of the saloon, then cut off. Jesse's hand went to his side wound. It throbbed in a slow pulse, not killing him yet, just reminding him there were limits to how long he could stand upright. He heard a soft step on the boards behind him. Not Tate, not a deputy, a different weight. Jesse stood. The silhouette was there again, closer now, just beyond the reach of the church lamp, hat brim low, coat dust dark, not Rourke, not Crane. The man held his hands loose at his sides, as if he didn't need a weapon to be dangerous. He touched 2 fingers to the brim, slow, polite. "Evening, Cole," the man said. Jesse's throat tightened. "I don't know you." The man's mouth curved slightly. "You knew me once. You just don't remember the parts that hurt." Jesse didn't move. "Name." The man took one small step forward, letting lamplight catch his face. Older than Jesse remembered, weathered but not by work, by violence. A thin scar ran from his cheekbone toward his ear. His eyes were a pale gray that didn't warm for anyone. Jesse's blood went cold in recognition that didn't come from memory. It came from consequence. "Silas," the man said. "Silas Morrow." The name hit Jesse like a fist, not because he remembered it clearly, because he remembered the way men used to go quiet when it was spoken. Jesse's jaw clenched. "You were at Silverton." Silas smiled as if Jesse had finally said something intelligent. "I was." Jesse's mind flashed. Canyon walls, gunfire, dust, a boy crying, a paper shoved into his hand, ink bleeding on his fingers. He couldn't see faces, but he could feel the guilt like a brand. Silas's gaze slid past Jesse toward the church door. "Nice place you've chosen," he said softly. "Hiding behind God now." Jesse's voice was low. "Say what you came to say." Silas nodded once. "Alden Rourke is angry. Jesse didn't blink. Good. Silas's smile thinned. Alden Rourke is also predictable. He wants to break you in front of witnesses. He wants to make the frontier remember who owns it. Jesse's eyes narrowed. And you? Silas stepped closer, not threatening, just inevitable. I want the notebook. Jesse's muscles tightened. It's not for sale. Silas's gaze stayed calm. Everything is for sale. You just haven't been offered the right thing yet. Jesse's voice went hard. Those papers belong to Ruth's girls now. Silas's eyes flicked to the church door again. Those girls, he murmured, are exactly why you'll listen. Jesse's hand drifted toward where his revolver should have been. It wasn't there. He'd left it. He'd walked into town bare on purpose. Silas noticed and didn't care. You think you're doing penance, Silas said. Buying debts, saving widows, it's almost sweet. He tilted his head. But penance doesn't erase the ledger, Cole. It just keeps the ink wet. Jesse's throat tightened. What do you know about ledgers? Silas's smile returned, small and sharp. I know Calhoun's notebook isn't the only copy. Jesse froze. What? Silas leaned in slightly, voice dropping. Cal made two. He mailed one, weeks ago, to a man who hates Rourke almost as much as he hates you. Jesse's mind raced. Who? Silas's eyes gleamed. That's the part you earn. Jesse stared at him, chest tight. Why tell me? Silas shrugged, almost casual. Because Alden thinks he's the only collector in this world. His gaze sharpened. He's not. From inside the church, a small sound, Mara shifting, half awake, sensing danger the way children do. Jesse held Silas's stare. If you came for the notebook, you could have taken it from Tate. Silas smiled. I could, but I prefer deals. They last longer. Jesse's voice went low. What's your deal? Silas's expression didn't change. You bring me the notebook before dawn, at the old livery behind the saloon. He paused. And I tell you where Cal sent the other copy, the one that actually matters. Jesse's jaw clenched. And if I don't? Silas's eyes slid toward the church door one last time. Then Alden comes back with fire and rope, and Stillwater learns a new kind of quiet. He looked back at Jesse. And the girls learn what their mother died trying to prevent. Jesse's hands curled into fists. He could feel the whole trap reshaping around him again, tighter than before, because now it wasn't just two predators. It was three. And the town was still made of fear, even if it had flinched toward courage for one night. Silas stepped back, as if the conversation was already finished. Dawn, he repeated, calm. Don't be late. He turned and walked away into the lamplight's edge, vanishing between buildings like a man who belonged to shadows. Jesse stood on the church steps, breathing slow, feeling his wound, feeling the notebook's weight in his mind even though it wasn't on him. Inside, Mara's small voice drifted out, thin with sleep and fear. Is it morning yet? Jesse stared into the dark where Silas had disappeared, and he understood with sick clarity that the frontier wasn't done collecting. He turned toward the church door, already moving, because there was only one way to keep the girls alive, and it meant walking straight back into the men who owned the night.